Good evening. Oos, to those in the dojo. This is Sensei 7 and West Coast Sensei. How are you guys doing this evening?
Oost to the Dojoman of the chat. This is the Seventh Coast Dojo. I am West Coast Sensei here with the Seventh Sensei, also known as the Seventh Project. Sending peace, love, and blessings and strength to our Dojoman out there in the chat. Sensei 7th, Oos, how are you?
Oos. Good this evening. Hopefully that minor technical difficulty was fixed. Am I coming in clear?
Yes, sir. Coming in perfectly clear. We're able to go, able to rock and roll.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, as you know, welcome. This is the first stream of the year for the Seventh Coast Dojo. 2020, man, that was a crazy ride, wasn't it, West Coast?
Sure was. Seems like the fun never stopped.
Okay. Whew, man. Well, what were your key takeaways from 2020?
It's a very insightful question. My key takeaways: expect the unexpected will probably be the phrase of the year, in my opinion. Just because everything was going so unanticipated and there's so much variance in it. And with all that has been happening in 2021, I mean, 17 days out, it seems as if this year is a continuation of what 2020 offered us. But what about you? What are your thoughts on it?
I would say that 2020 was a spectacle nonetheless, and a constant reminder of the mission for us, myself in particular, but us, the Dojo men, overall. That the lines that were recently blurred for some have become more solid, and there are sides to be picked or paths that may cross. However, for us in the dojo, we take our own path and remember not to stray too far from it. So my key takeaway was to always remember my point of origin and my desired destination. And what I mean by desired destination, the goals that I set for myself. And am I taking the necessary steps to reach towards those goals and achieve them over the course of time?
Good, man, good. And with that being said, we can just dive right into this Kata 7. The topic being the exploitation of black male light is part of the design. And for those who aren't aware, we put on the cover of this stream a photo of individual or entity that comes from the movie Soul, which was recently released by Disney and Pixar. And I had a chance to watch it over this weekend, as a matter of fact. And the idea of your light and the idea of your time here really resonated with me, and I wanted to bring it forth to the dojo and the dojoman and you, brother Seventh, to dissect and really break some boards and really just go through a routine of resettling and repositioning ourselves for this year, especially. And so, first and foremost, were you able to? I know that we were talking a little bit offline, um, but from your first impression of what the movie Soul represented, what were your takeaways? What were your perception before I get into it?
Okay, initially, this is the disclaimer to the Dogeman. I have not watched the movie as of late. However, I have received multiple interpretations of the movie from those in, you know, my personal life. And from the mixed reviews that I got about the movie, the impression was very jaded. And so I wasn't apted to watch it or open to watching it. But upon further investigation and due diligence, and speaking with you, West Coast, a little bit offline about the film, I will be open to viewing it before providing a more in depth observation or analysis of the film.
Right on, right on. Um, I think that moving forward, especially in this year and in this climate, something that is going to be extremely important in having a holistic view of your environment and how to properly assess how to navigate it is getting to the source material of everything that is presented. um just to give a disclaimer and background about the movie Soul, my impression of it after watching it, I think that it was a good movie. There were moments that definitely resonated with me, and I think that were good life lessons that could be gleaned from it, as well as they did a really good job of adding some esoteric elements to it. But on top of that, there were some elements that were misandric, reinforced elements of the gynocracy and black culture that isn't necessarily the best or the most constructive. Um, but overall, I think that it's a good piece of work to observe, um, and just to check out within the repertoire. I don't think that it'd be a big waste of time. But the biggest takeaway in pertaining to um, this particular topic, the idea of one's light in this society is important, because with the changes and shifts, with the political shifts, the cultural shifts that are occurring right now, um, one of the things that remains apparent or remains static is the infrastructure that is designed under. And so, if you've been paying attention to some other content that has been presented, and some of the readings that we have covered here in the dojo, which is including but not limited to the Man Not, and listening to other literature that's out there, and some of the academics that are in this space, um, our light in particular is one of those commodities that is going to continually be up for use and exploitation, and it is the norm. And so, with that being the understanding or acceptance of where our infrastructure is, how to navigate and protect yourself throughout that is the theme that I want to build upon. um I'm gonna pass it to you, brother Seven. I don't know if you wanted to chime in or comment on something that I've just mentioned, or if you wanted to add your piece to it. But that's sort of the precedence and sort of the vantage point that I think is worth discussing moving forward.
No, I think you managed to hit the nail on the head, and I share the same sentiment. Let's just get into it.
All right, perfect, perfect. So, with that being said, and give a salute to BGS Ibmore. There was a discussion, or there was a video piece that he did talking about valuing your light and attention, right? And the biggest premise about it is about your non-sexual male attention, and the fact that it is a commodity to be used, and it's something of value. And when you give it away, you basically are cheating yourself in a sense, and you, without knowing it, are putting yourself in a perpetual vulnerable position, not only on a interpersonal level with the people that you know, because you set a precedence in how you interact with them, but also on a societal level, in the sense of individuals having that put in as the standard are able to, reap benefits and reap advantages off of your unknowing sacrifice. And so, with this idea of BMI and BMA, this concept that's starting to develop, um, in the space growing in a vein where you can have your own agency and speak for yourself, a biggest p or not even, let me be clear, an element as you matriculate through this idea of agency, um because I believe that within the within the black man, there's a level of compassion, and Dr. T.S. Johnson has kind of coined it as this, the sacred black masculine, where, um, even if we are in a comparable position where we may not be in the best light, we will go above and beyond, and we're hardly recognized for it. And I propose, going off of that idea, as you're moving within your agency, um, being able to decipher when it's appropriate to exercise your sacred black masculine, which is a part of your light, in my opinion, right? Um, and when not to, so then you're not jeopardized in and being put in the same political, interpersonal, or cultural position that you've historically, um, have been placed in for the sole intent purpose of exploitation under any circumstance. And so I'm a circle back to I may circle back to the movie Soul, but the bigger picture of what I want to illustrate off of this idea, um, actually comes from an excerpt from Robert Greene, Law Number 10, which is: infection, avoid the unhappy and unlucky. You can die from someone else's misery. Emotional states are as infectious as disease. You may feel you are helping the drowning man, but you are only precipitating your own disaster. The unfortunate sometimes draw misfortune on themselves. They will also draw it unto you. Associate with the happy and the fortunate instead. And so, taking this principle, right, law number 10, within the context of protecting your light as well as valuing it, um, when it comes to navigating in your inner circles, when it comes to navigating interpersonally, like on in the job or workspace that you're working in, as well as society or any other topics, one of the themes that comes up or that I've noticed comes up is individuals attaching themselves to black males' plight, struggle, um, their challenges, and equating their challenges to yours so that it can hold the same weight. And inadvertently, what tends to happen is we will adopt or we will allow individuals to perform this act, and it will, in a sense, minimize and diminish our plight and sacrifice for the other to thrive and grow, if that makes any sense. As far as us as a collective and how we're perceived, there is a continual argument that pops up, right? About how black men are having all of these babies, they're ruining the community. This same stereotype, this same trope. And something that needs to be identified because it's been called out is that as a collective, one of the ways that they exploit our light is they will judge us by the lowest common denominator and in the minority instead of the majority, i.e., 20% of the males that are reproducing with 80% of the women, in a sense, that are having all of these babies out of wedlock is in the minority instead of the majority, which, I think that and you can correct me if I'm wrong, about 50% of black males are unwed and don't have children. The other half are married with children. And even within those statistics, the black men who do have children attempt to participate or are as if more involved in their children's lives more than other counterparts or other cultures. And so the infection piece on that in particular is one, just accepting the status quo of being this John Henry and accepting the misinformation that's propagated, saying that, oh yeah, us as black males, we need to do better, because if it isn't 100% of the men, if it's only one, then that means that it falls on everybody, which is inconclusive and inaccurate when you're talking about a sample size, or if you're talking about a population. There's always going to be a margin or a variance of a population or a group that's going to have a type of diversity. And so that's the first piece on on the sense. But on a larger sense, the numbers that they're talking about as far as the amount of children that are being born, talking about in this generation, isn't actually adding up. So what we're going to do is we might have to throw up the fair use, not even might, definitely have to throw up the fair use on this one. This is, and here's what I'll do. I'm going to share this screen one more time and add the audio. We're going to take a look-see at America's population in general. So then we have a full scope and we're not going off of just anecdotal evidence and individuals' personal experience. We're actually able to have a mixture of non-biased third-party information in order to make a more informed conclusion instead of running with random narratives. So this is coming out of CNBC. This dropped last week. Is the U.S. running out of people? So we're going to build off of this, get into a little bit of empirical data, and then add commentary in between. And Brother Seventh, if you have anything that you wanted to stop on while this is running, feel free to chime in. All right.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right. So hold on. Let's hit the comments real quick. All right. We got we got some folks in the building. We got some heavy hitters in the building.
Yes, sir. See, we got 800 in the building right now. I know we
Mm-hmm.
have JBA coming in attendance early. Oos.
Oos.
You know, we have Shop Talk Live. Oos.
Oos.
All the Ibmore. The Bread Man,
The
aka
bread
Dojo.
man. Yeah. My
Oos.
man. Oos.
We got brother AB Media. Oos.
Oos.
You know,
Oos to
and
the
big shout out
artist.
to the Dojo men in the background, you know, that have yet to comment. We see you too.
Yes,
Oos.
sir. Oos to all the Dogemen. All right, let's get into this.
Children is the ultimate vote of confidence in the future.
It's you really believe in what your opportunities are going to be going forward. You're very certain about what your future looks like. In this quarantine time, that's the last thing that we can say.
Mothers typically talk about the more children you had is bad for their pocketbook.
What we learned from the Great Recession is that every 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate reduces births by 1%.
Despite speculation of a surge in quarantine babies, the U.S. fertility rate is actually shrinking and has been for a while.
Births have been falling for the last almost 15 years now at this point.
Millennials have less financial confidence than the generation before us. Living through our second once-in-a-lifetime recession has made big financial decisions like providing for and creating a brand new human, like my niece here, Sydney, quite difficult.
And I've got 2 little kids, so I'm pretty concerned for them.
Plus, there's a prevailing ideology that large families are a drain on the environment.
The costs of ongoing economic growth as it's currently designed are causing damage to planet and people.
Meanwhile, baby boomers are retiring and aging out of the system.
If you have an economy that since the end of the Second World War has grown based on consumerism, what happens when all your consumers are old and they have everything they want?
So, off top, they're already informing you that population level of America in general is already on a decline. And in fact, there is an incentive and there's a role and there's a function for this society to have people. I know the BGS has alluded to this idea of the importance of population and what is their function. And there have been detractors who are saying, you know, this idea of overpopulation and there not being enough people, or there being too many people and not enough to, you know, sustain this environment, when he states, and when others who bring up the actual architecture of countries state that the population is in an artificial construct, they're informing you right here, or they're reinforcing what has been spoken. We're not dealing with an overpopulation issue right now because the artificial construct that is this machine has accounted for those. But I digress.
So, is the U.S. running out of people? And what impact does population size have on the economy?
To maintain the current population size, every woman would need to have 2.1 children. This is known as the rate of replacement. And the 0.1 is because, you know, not everyone goes on to have children themselves, and there's some child mortality. In the United States, the total fertility rate, that measure is now around 1.7.
The total fertility or birth rate refers to the actual number of children each woman is having. Currently, there are nearly 7.8 billion people in the world, over 330 million in the U.S.
Through fertility alone, we would expect our population to start to decline if that rate is sustained for a very long period.
People think, for example, that fertility is out of control. Well, the truth is it isn't. I mean, if you take a look particularly at millennial fertility in the United States, it's down to 1 now. The American birth rate is well below replacement rate and continuing to decline.
Although declining fertility rates can be a leading indicator for a recession, it is more often correlated with increased education and opportunities for women. But female workers add a lot to the bottom line.
All right. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. Go ahead.
Upon the notion of the carbon footprint, the bigger the family, I would put a pin in that, and I would love to study the differences between groups, in particular with carbon footprints, the carbon footprint size compared to other groups, in particular, and this is just me making light of the situation, most of the people in our community, brothers and sisters, we are the biggest reusers of plastic bags. As you know, some of us may have them in the
Yes, sir.
kitchen cabinet. We use them for other means. So I wonder what is and also single use plastics. Some families, you have a cousin that washes out the Tupperware when they order out. They get their Uber Eats going, and the container comes. They wash it and reuse that plastic container after giving it a good scrub.
Facts.
So I would love a study on the actual measurement, a unit of measure for the differences between, our community's carbon footprint among other groups, so to speak.
You said Captain Planet would be proud.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, let's continue.
Increased education and opportunities for women, but female workers add a lot to the bottom line. According to one study, if women entered and stayed in the U.S. workforce at the same rate as they do in Norway, the U.S. economy would be $1.6 trillion larger. American women now are having fewer children than our mothers. In 2020, the birth rate dropped to its lowest level in 35 years. There's also been a huge decline in teenage births in the U.S. What's clear is that there are less unintentional births than ever before.
In addition to the decline that we've been seeing in fertility, there's another trend that's happening underneath that, which is an increasing age at birth.
It's more like in the late 20s or 30 or something now compared to during the baby boom, it would have been 20.
It used to be, uncommon to see a 40-something-year-old woman who is now planning a pregnancy. Now that seems to almost be, at least for us, a norm.
Women have changed the lives that they want to live when they have more of a decision to make about the type of family. They're more empowered to make the kind of decision they want to make about their family. And when they
Pause. Okay, you caught the same thing I did, but let me hear your
Nah, brother, I need you to break the board. Go ahead.
yeah. So let's target the average 40-year-old woman, planning a family, becoming a little bit more common, and the use of the word empowered, and now they can actually control the family structure. And when you look at the data, or what the data suggests, right, the marriage and divorce rates, along with other factors, that with the higher levels of education and, BWs, they tend to have these diluted family models or structures in their heads. And then they end up on a particular individual's show asking him for the solutions, and to help them along so that they can find it. However, let's just see how the rest of this plays out. But before we do that, West Coast, please provide your your observation on this.
I think that this excerpt answers a question that it responds to a statement that has been grossly misused throughout these debates and these arguments, and downright insults that pervade some of these spaces in regards to the idea of reproductive rights and whose responsibility and whose onus that falls under. So the idea that all these black men are making all of these babies goes out of the window, because even from a legal standpoint, and from this from an article source, you're talking about the dynamic between men and women, births and children, that all falls under the woman's wheelhouse. Although those detractors will try to put it on the man, the actual decision to go through to carry said birth to term and going through that falls under the that falls under the pretense of the woman and having that decision. And so the argument about how the male is responsible like 100% for a child that is unintended, although the woman has majority rights in whether or not that child is conceived, that has to be challenged because society, from a societal standpoint and a legal standpoint, they're the ones with the actual rights. And this is coming from a place of just common sense. Of if you have the power, then you inherently have the responsibility, and responsibility does not have a gender to it.
You can.
And so, as you can see, the trend has been that women are deciding not to have children, and those that are having it out of wedlock, or not even out of wedlock, but just unplanned, it's not enough to sustain our population at large. We're actually we're running below replacement. And they're going into the reasoning why, the elements that are driving this decision, and none of it is talking about how brother ain't doing stuff and how they not providing. Women who decide to have children, even when a man may not be financially stable, meaning they're having it on their own, those things are still occurring. And from an infrastructure standpoint, there is an incentive to these children being born because you need children, or you need people, I should say, who are going to be adults to feed into the model of consumerism that has been adopted societally. You can't have consumerism if you don't have enough people to consume. So that's my piece on it.
And before we get back into it, let's pay attention to this actual, like the subtitles here, the closed captions, right? So they get to choose their family structure, right? And when they make that decision, not for everybody, but for whom?
Oh, very good point. That's a very good pin. Before we jump back into it, big oos to the Dojoman R. Charles.
Oos.
Yes, sir. Oos, we're back. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year's, brothers. And I see we have Sheed We here in the building. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are here. Everything's okay now. You know why? Because the two senseis are here.
No, that's right. All right, let us continue.
When they make that decision, not for everybody, but for most people, it's fewer kids.
So women are waiting to have their first child longer and then their subsequent children. What's sort of remains to be seen in this area is the extent to which the decline in fertility that we're seeing is really a delay of births, so that these declines for women in their teens and early 20s will be made up later when they're in their 30s, or whether this is a permanent reduction in their lifetime fertility.
The pandemic may have accelerated this trend, as people are less likely to have babies in uncertain financial times. That might mean less American-born workers, consumers, and students. However, that could work out well for babies like Sydney when she applies for a job in 20 years.
Oh, no, wait, pause. No, she didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Run that back.
Permanent reduction in their lifetime fertility.
The pandemic may have accelerated this trend, as people are less likely to have babies in uncertain financial times. That might mean less American-born workers, consumers, and students. However, that could work out well for babies like Sydney when she applies for a job in 20 years.
Man, look, you gotta respect the mother's love and aspirations for her offspring. You gotta appreciate that. But was that necessary to slip that in there? It was so subtle.
Smooth flex for hey, that was the auntie flex right there, man. That wasn't even her child. That's the ironic thing. That's her niece. That's the auntie flex right there, fam. So it goes to show you, even within the article that they're presenting, this is the information on the ground as is. and it
Right.
extends far beyond our subculture. So
Correct. And notice the priorities, gentlemen. So the priority is still there. That priority and agency, regardless of the uncertain times, it's still there.
mhm.
Do what you will with that information, and let's continue.
At the end of the day, the fewer people you're competing with, the easier things are for you. There is that in terms of the upside.
Wait, pause. Did we just witness a double dip? I thought that was something we was canceling in 2020. I thought we was gonna stop the double dip, man.
Oof, fam, somebody must have missed the memo. Said that note was completely missed. So yeah, the upside is you won't be able to compete. Those are the pros. So look, there are pros to less children. Is the fact that there will be less competition, but the problem, I'm gonna let them continue. I'm gonna let them finish because sometimes a second opinion, a third party opinion, is better than from a voice. So
Yes,
the
sir.
easier things are for you. There is that in terms of the upside. But I mean, who knows? Maybe one of the kids that isn't born is going to cure cancer. Would have cured cancer.
Population size and fertility rates should inform how we plan for the future and how we think about social programs. For example, if there are less younger workers able to pay into Social Security the way it is currently set up, the funds will run out in my lifetime.
So in particular, you hear people talk a lot about Social Security. That's a system where current workers support current retirees. And so as the population ages, we have more retirees, but fewer births. People are worried that that system is not going to be sustainable. And there are other programs that face that challenge. There are also
quick little black pill excerpt. As you know, that social security card, that's your SKU number, buddy. That's your product number within the country as far as your receipt. So when the government and when the economy and when the structure has children, there is a role and there is a function for you to be in there. And so they're going to cover a lot of I'll just let them speak for themselves. I'm not even gonna give it away like that. We're gonna let that roll.
concerns about economic growth. To continue to grow, we need innovators, inventors, workers, and as we have fewer children, we will have fewer of those inputs into economic growth.
But that actually has important implications even before you get to that. I mean, like if we have, a birth decline now means 5 years from now, it's probably is not the great time to be thinking about school construction, for instance.
I worry about people who would love to bring kids into the world, but just feel like they can't, that the costs are too high, or that they don't feel good enough about their economic security, their economic futures to be able to make that decision.
Now, when they say there, who are they talking about?
Who are you talking to? Who purchased those boots?
Who purchased those boots? Notice how, because I wanted to call it out earlier, she alluded to when children aren't born, then there is the opportunity for, invention and production and innovation, like all of that human potential that's lost. And she tried to, she switched out cog for input. He said without those inputs. So keeping you, streamlined in how society views their population. You are an item, you are a piece of commodity to be used, to be fed into the great machine. Going back to, this whole concept of red pill and knowing the truth. These are the outcomes and decisions that, people above you who are managing the landscape and environment that you're in are thinking about. And there's a reason why this piece is coming out to the public to bring this type of discourse in there, because they're thinking about futures of populations. But I digress.
If you really thought about what was happening in terms of our population and what it looked like going forward, you change the way that you ask questions about what the future economy is going to be.
So as we have workers who are more productive, then you can sustain more retirees for each individual worker.
Japan, which has had a falling birth rate for years, is a leader in innovation.
Japan is, when it comes to things like fertility and aging, is the canary in the coal mine for all of us. The median age of Japan is 48 now. Their birth rate is down around 1.4 or 1.5, and they lose approximately 400,000 people from their population every year. So what's the solution in Japan? Robots. If you want to talk about industrial robots or robots of any type, they're looking at all those types of solutions. Why? It's not, it's, it might make for interesting science fiction or whatever, and we might think it's just a peculiar thing, but the truth is it's a necessity.
And shout out to Brother Nameless, who spoke on the Hikikomori and those following I believe it's not the herb life, but
the herbal man, the herbal woman.
Yeah, exactly. This is what it looks like in real time in regards to population and dealing with individuals. Why are they going towards this? Directly ties back to your population. And these are the interim solutions that are coming into play or that are coming online in order for societies to survive and sustain this artificial construct that have been developed.
Correct.
Any additional thoughts on this before I keep it rolling?
No, sir. Keep it rolling.
All right.
It can't be anything but bad. And the reason that it's going to be bad is because robots don't buy new outfits. They don't buy cars. They don't buy things. They're not consumers.
Man, run that back.
Invest in robots, right? Hold on. So peep this. Invest in robots. It is a necessity. It's essential. But then it could be bad because they're not consumers. They don't buy things. But invest in robots.
Right.
So shout out to convenience over actual efficiency and keeping things going. But hey, robots could probably do a better job.
See, they can do a better job in producing, but they don't need any consuming. So the question begs, if you've already implemented a culture of consumerism, meaning we need people to buy, but individuals aren't making babies in order to have a surplus to market to, how do you sustain that? And this is a rhetorical question. How do you sustain that model of living or culture, really? Because consumerism is a culture, in regards to the idea of, having shopping therapy, being, having all of these quick buys and flash sales. All of those things have to be taught and have to be integrated. They're constructed around human behaviors and human patterns. And so these are the questions that they're running into. So I just had to run that back because, again, these are the next questions that need to be asked, because now that you have automation in play, you have tech in play to be a lot more efficient in producing things. There is also an inherent need in your workers in order to keep your society thriving, which is an individual goes to work. When they go to work, there are implicit costs that actually are associated with them that the society within itself can exploit or use, and that other businesses are dependent upon. You go into say you work at in a government office, right? Because there's a government office that I used to work near. In that building may have, maybe 200 employees on top of people who are doing delivery service, mail, so on and so forth. What do people need to do while they're doing that? They need time for actual break. So what do? You'll have people who maintain like a lawn service where people can go out to a park, and in that park, there's an economy for people to maintain that park so it's nice and beautified. There are restaurants that will pop up around it, whether it be a food truck or, a restaurant, a sit down spot, because people will need to eat. People will need a variety of what they want to eat, dietary needs, so on and so forth. There'll be gas stations because people need to maintain their vehicles. all of that stuff goes out the window if you have a robot that's sitting inside of your building, and they don't need breaks. They don't need time to. They don't need. I'll refine it. They don't need as many breaks because there is time for system maintenances, updates, checking things up. But how many humans does it take to do that? Maybe like one or two, and the amount of time that they need to physically be in that building to maintain it is less than what 5 or 10 people being in that building who are working to do those tasks would need. So other parts of economies will uh, basically suffer, and they'll deteriorate because each system is dependent on each other. Unless you program a robot to eat, which is, I mean, that'd be stupid, but that's just me being facetious. But I'll continue though.
Why? It's not, it might make for interesting science fiction or whatever, and we might think it's just a peculiar thing, but the truth is it's a necessity. It can't be anything but bad. And the reason that it's going to be bad is because robots don't buy new outfits. They don't buy cars. They don't buy things. They're not consumers. They can help your productivity, but they can't help the consumer situation.
At the end of the day, people matter. So the more people there are, the more economic activity there is.
If the main economic concern is finding new consumers, adjusting our interpretation of who a consumer is can help. For example, we can shift our focus to the aging population.
So economic growth is generated by people who are, typically something like 16 to 60 in their prime working years. And if you get it shifted toward the top so that you have more retirees, as is happening right now with the baby boom generation entering into that.
Where have we seen this before?
Is this familiar to you?
Does this chart look? Do you recall? Does anybody recall this chart in population popping up anywhere?
Mhm.
But I digress.
That phase, or you have fewer at the bottom that are going to be future workers, then that upsets that balance. Now, I think what some people are worried about is that we may have both of those things happening at the same time.
So one of the biggest challenges that we've got going forward is to how we can trigger that generational transfer of funds from the older population by turning them into consumers. The way we think about generational transfer of funds is we think about mom and dad willing us the money. Well, we need it faster. One of the biggest prejudices that we have in terms of looking at the economy is we only see old people as consumers. They're sitting in all the best houses.
Did you want to comment on the imagery?
Man, I don't like the imagery. I didn't like that imagery. But we can play it back.
See what they did there?
Willing us the money. Well, we need it faster. One of the biggest prejudices that we have in terms of looking at the economy is we only see old people as consumers. They're sitting in all the best houses. They have
Pause. The willingness. We need the money. We need it faster. And then in the next slide, who are they getting the money from?
They slick. They not even slick with it no more.
Yeah,
or is it just me? They just blatant.
They said you wanted representation. We got you. We gonna lay it clear. We gonna lay it clear now.
They said we can't just see old people as consumers, and this is the image that they give us. That's scandalous, fam. And she has a ring. So man, there's so much. So yeah, we'll get into our subculture because obviously our subculture is a part of the greater culture. But I want to give a wider view context. We are trying to give you a wider view context before we delve into the minutia, so then we can tackle this bit by bit.
Correct.
All the best houses. They have all the money. They have all the pensions. They have everything. The single biggest power group in the economy going forward are older women, because there's a lot of them. And there's more economy going forward are older women, because there's a lot of them. And there's more every day. Women outlive men. There are always more boys born than girls in every country except where there's an artificial intervention. But by the age of 30 in most developed countries, there's more women than men, and then every year after that. So it's not that old women outlive old men, which they do. It's that women outlive men in every age category once we get to mid-age.
The U.S. can look beyond our borders for more consumers and workers.
Well, the easiest way to manipulate the size of the population is through immigration.
I think it's important to point out that more babies is not the only way out of those problems. So immigration is an obvious way where we can continue to grow our population.
First of all, immigration policies work instantly. If you want another 25-year-old worker, you bring in another 25-year-old worker. Pronatalist fertility policies are about...
Or what about the 25-year-old workers that's already here that are disenfranchised and economically disadvantaged and are waiting for an opportunity? What about that? But I digress. Let's continue.
20 years from now.
And frankly, for the history of the United States, it's been the huge American advantage. It still is the shining city on the hill for most people in the world. If they're going to immigrate, and we do surveys at Ipsos where I see this, the most popular place for people to immigrate in the world is still the United States.
There are still a lot of people out there looking for a new country to call home. The UNHCR estimates there were 79.5 million forcibly displaced people worldwide at the end of 2019.
What about your displaced people in your borders?
Keep going.
What about them?
See,
we if we're talking about looking for a place to call home, how are we home and we're not even home?
and this goes back to the whole, this is the part that we're breaking down from a subculture standpoint. We have our function, which is to be the permanent underclass, while the majority, which is losing their declining population of their workforce within society, is going to be replenished as a solution through these means, finding people from other countries to step in and fill that gap, while the permanent class has been fulfilled.
Let's really talk about it. If you could find 79.5 million people, displaced people, homes now, how come you can't find? Let's just throw a random number out there. I don't know, maybe 11 to 12 million men, black men in particular, a spot or a place or a job
that fit that demographic that you're looking for.
Exactly. That fit the demographic in which you're looking for.
16 to 60.
Yeah, I think I know a lot of 16 to 60-year-old brothers who are looking for opportunities to shine and reach and aspire to higher goals. But I'm not a mathematician or anything, West Coast, but 10 to 12 million sounds a lot less than 79.5 million. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I think your math it sounds about right. But I think that there's one exception missing, at least from what I've noticed.
Okay, educate me, my brother.
The thing is, those 12 million are the untouchables. They already have their role. It's culturally unprofitable to have that population fill that gap. It's culturally unprofitable because you've already trained them to be in a mindset of poverty. And so in order to retrain them and have that, have them fill that gap as far as your workforce, that then leaves you with another task to fill in the bottom half or your permanent underclass, or not even your permanent underclass, but an underclass in order for your middle class and the other classes to sustain themselves. And the video is going to break this down. But from a country standpoint, from a domestic standpoint, those parts of your population, you're profiting off of that. You are able to, if you keep them at that bottom rung, culturally you can bring them in, and our Charles, our Charles kind of alluding to it, the cue to Biden Harris. As far as the Black experience and the way that the narrative is being displayed, it has become a moniker and a flag for all individuals who feel disenfranchised. But in order for that to continue, you need to have that underclass in place and have a certain amount of, let's just say, incidents to occur in order for that theme to resonate and for it to continue. Because don't let it don't let the individuals who you're getting these broken stories and trauma for slip up out of the gate. Because the minute that they do that, then I mean, as far as if you look at other groups who have gone through types of traumas and massacres, they they definitely, well, for one, they can't use that same narrative as frequently because they've already moved up in social order, social pecking order. But when they get into that point of power, they are definitely not as forgiving. And so there's a profit margin culturally to keeping your underclass their underclasses.
Now, and what was the cost of racism again? What was the cost of that price tag? Do you remember?
Man, I forgot the ratio. We have to go back into the American slave coast to reappraise that and then add some inflation to it. But there's definitely a cost benefit analysis to it that is being put and being implemented. So they're getting their ROI, in my opinion. But
I mean, are we sure? But I mean, this 79.5 M. That's a big M to pay to bring them in when you have less than in your borders. And an interesting perspective, Charles. Untouchables, undesirables. I guess that will become the new terminology in 2020.
Undesirables. I dig it. All right. Let's keep it rolling.
40% of those were children. There are also 26 million refugees, half of whom are children.
What we're particularly concerned about is that every country in the world, wherever possible, can enable people to move to their countries, and in particular, can absorb refugees and asylum seekers. We have to retain that compassionate capacity.
Pause.
All right, go ahead. I already knew you was about to go in. Let's go.
We have to retain that compassionate capacity. Are you serious? Is he serious? I mean, is the collective serious? Let me not address the individual. Let me address the ideology. Is the ideology serious?
Look at the imagery right after that. look at the imagery, bro. I mean, they black pill skirt is showing, fam. They said we need to retain them for our population under the guise of being compassionate, because they're being displaced from their homes. And we're not even gonna get into the why they're why their homes aren't livable, because that is we definitely want to keep this channel up. But but yeah, this is the great system that we're talking about, right? But the way that they're presenting it, obviously, it has to be in a palatable way that when it hits your ears, it's something that can resonate. So he speaks to the interest of compassion and look at how, these displaced individuals have no home. Let's find a home for them, and as well as fulfill our societal need and getting back up, getting our quotient, getting our birth rate back up. So, matter of fact, I'll let them say it again because I think that this is important in understanding when we talk about looking at the system for what it is. Without any moral judgment, these are the thoughts and the problems that they're thinking of solving, and the way that you push it out to the masses and the way that you get them to adopt it are through these measures. So let's run that back again, because that imagery and the way that they played that was beautiful. That was a beautiful piece of propaganda. I'm not going front. So let's run that. Let's run that again.
There are also 26 million refugees, half of whom are children.
What we're particularly concerned.
Remember what we talked about with children, right? When they are children, they are a blank slate, so you can bring them up within the culture that you want. Bada boom.
About is that every world, wherever possible, can enable people to move to their countries, and in particular, can absorb refugees and asylum seekers. We have to retain that compassionate capacity.
Many of those displacements are occurring because of drastic changes in the environment. The World Bank estimates that by 2050, there will be 143 million additional climate migrants from just Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia.
Let's get that snapshot one more time.
Estimates that by 2050, there will be 143 million additional climate migrants from just Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. So there won't be a deficit anytime soon.
Since the publication of The Population Bomb in 1968, there's been a prevailing ideology that the world is facing a dire overpopulation problem. That's not true.
At the moment, with 7.8 billion and counting people on the planet, we are stretching the carrying capacity of the planet. We know that we're breaching certain boundaries, whether it's climate, whether it's marine fisheries, whether it's fresh water, etc., etc.
Experts worry that the planet has reached its so-called carrying capacity, or the total amount of people the Earth can sustain.
If we think about the global population, there are projections that suggest the world is going to reach its max capacity sometimes within the next 100 years. And that's because while fertility is below replacement rate within the US and other developed countries, it is not elsewhere. So on net, we expect to see the world population to continue to grow for the next several decades.
But we do know that at the moment, we're overstressing our planet. And we also know that people want to choose to have smaller families when they have the ability, when they have the access and the choice. And therefore, we can make positive, progressive moves to take the heat off the planet, and particularly in terms of climate change.
Project Drawdown ranks family planning and educating girls in its top 10 solutions to climate change.
Wait. Run that back, Turbo.
Yeah. I already knew. Let's go.
The heat off the planet, and particularly in terms of climate change.
Project Drawdown ranks family planning and educating girls in its top 10 solutions to climate change.
Pause. What happened to the boys? What happened to those boys that become men, that are actual builders and maintenance workers and blue collar men, as per the environment in our observation of the current state of the world and what some of these girls who have become women are saying? They spit at the blue collar workers, and yet you think that leaving them out in forms of education and health is of no importance. Bolster up the deluded class in exchange for those who actually maintain order. Gotcha. Again, I'm no mathematician, but when we're solving for X, this just looks like another, formula of alpha mathematics from gynometry standards. We're taking that constant, and which is zero, by the way, where we're multiplying it with a power on top of that. I wonder how this is going to work out.
From the looks of it.
Look at the project name. It's Project Drawdown, right? So put the constant of zero in there and crank that bitch up to the nines.
Draw down. It's funny. It's funny because the way that it's, at least if I was in their shoes and at least with the information that they're giving us, it looks like they're prioritizing women over men, clearly, from a incentive that women are going to outlive men much longer. So they need women as consumers. So they're going to prioritize their health and education to extend their life as long as possible while letting the men be relegated to a sperm donor type of position, because that's really what it looks like they need. And especially with the fact that women are having less children, um, the value more and more as the, when I talk about from an artificial construct perspective, right? When you have a society that's an artificial construct, um, that's really the value that men start to come in at, and sort of the play that they're leaning towards. It depends on where they're trying to take it, but that's what it appears that they're going, especially with the fact that they explicitly stated the focus is going to be on women in regards to gender and priority in addressing climate change. And I would like to know that sub study as far as cultures and like the plastic and reduction, because I was laughing to myself because I'm like, bro, I got some plastic up in here myself, bro. Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Exactly. And I wonder how many women are going to be actually building and installing these offshore wind turbines. How many of them are going to actually get into the tropical rainforest restoration work, managing refrigerants, you know, improving and cleaning cook stoves. Now that's up for debate, but how many women are actually getting up and dealing with solar panel or solar thermal or geothermal, any level of hard labor installations? And again, this isn't a question of whether they can or cannot do it, but we would have to start to investigate the actual teams dynamic, how many of them are on specific installation teams, and that should give us a clear indicator of if the statement that was just stated is within the world's best interest or a particular gender's best interest. But
Mhm.
I digress at this moment, and let's continue.
All right.
Remember, though, that people in developed nations consume more renewable resources than those in developing nations. The Global Footprint Network estimates that if all the people on the Earth consumed as much as Americans do, we would need 500% of the Earth's natural resources to sustain the population. For comparison, they estimate that if everyone used renewable resources at the same rate as those in India, we would only be using 70% of one Earth's renewable resources.
But, we see as countries develop, fertility tends to decline. And so we expect as developments.
Let's run that back. Folks always, sometimes it takes a second opinion of other individuals, but here you have it.
As countries develop, fertility tends to decline. And so we expect as development spreads around the world that will happen. And that's why we project that actually populations will start to decline around the world sometime within the next 100 years.
Global population is expected to peak at 9.7 billion by 2064 and then fall back down to 8.8 billion by 2100.
And Bangladesh would be a good example, where through voluntary means, without coercion, working at the community level, women's groups, they reduced their fertility rate from 7 to 8 kids per woman in the 70s and 80s down to 2.2, near replacement now. And that's had a really beneficial effect. The women have become more economically active. They're doing stuff in their community.
Now, I think that
this is a nice shout out to who we have coming in. Shout out to the Indian sister who loves Tupac. I'm just saying.
Man, but even all right, so he gave this illustration, right, about instead of without coercion working at a community level within women's groups, right, and controlling fertility and controlling the amount of children that are to be birthed, when you talk about the ownership or the onus of reproductive rights and who actually controls the amount of children that are to be conceived, it falls squarely upon the women. In regards to the managing of the amount of children and who sets the precedence and the tone culturally of what's considered acceptable and what's considered not acceptable, which further reinforces when you look at some of the problems that we face on a community level. If you want to, identify this as a community, I know people have different outlooks about it, but the class structure that we've been assigned, the it falls in line with what he's mentioning, where the precedents in regards to how children are conceived and the way that they are conceived and managed still fall squarely upon the women's, domain, outside of, incest and rape, which is a whole nother thing. And I don't want to say that again because, them folks is watching. The man doesn't have the reproductive rights or the ability to really choose when and where a baby can be conceived. And so this whole notion, this whole cultural gynometry of trying to place the majority, if not all of the blame on the man or men as a population group, which is the minority within the group and don't even have actual rights to it, seems ludicrous when you look at it from a holistic perspective.
Working at the community level through women's groups, they reduced their fertility rate from 7 to 8 kids per woman in the 70s and 80s down to 2.2, near replacement now.
So the women's group actually reduced their fertility rate from 7 to 2. That was a cultural function of the women in regards to managing that. That is something that this is a demonstration or a sample of a proof of concept, in the sense of, if you're looking for a solution on how to control the out of wedlock birth rate within the community, if you're looking for an answer, you can look to the women's groups that have been since the 70s and 80s implemented within India to manage their population size. But in order to do that requires cultural agreement, which, that's the whole point of dissension when you talk about the problems that we face on a community level that we're trying to solve.
Hold on, but peep the imagery. Look at how you see little homie in the back looking at the woman, but then you see the other little homie in the front row looking right at the camera like cultural agreement. and they blame us.
What you mean is my fault?
Right.
You see me sitting here, I'm minding my business. Homie right here, he just like, look, just look straight. Don't even look at the camera.
He said, I heard about what's going on in the US. I ain't for it. All right, let me get real. Let me get real serious real quick.
Yeah.
Continue.
And that's had a really beneficial effect. The women have become more economically active. They're doing stuff in their community. They're able to make choices. They've taken the pressure off their environment.
And if you're thinking that the population is going to be 11 billion or 10 billion people by the end of the century, you've got real concerns about that. But what if I told you that the population was probably going to be the same as it is today, or maybe even smaller? Well, if we're carrying the population that we already have, and technology is going to continue to improve, from everything from agriculture to cleaning on our environment to transportation, everything that you can imagine, then by the end of the century, I think we're probably going to be okay.
Oh man. Well, there was a lot to take away from that.
Yes, sir.
Some dojo men, they're taking a short break. I know they needed 15. That was a lot to absorb. So we have 300 in the building currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wanted to highlight that from a global perspective.
Okay.
Just to parse it down to what we're dealing with on a subculture perspective and valuing one's light. because the idea of reproduction and responsibility of reproduction, because there is an economic incentive tied to it that, or that's attached to it, that is being used to essentially be exploited and taken advantage of. Um, the
Correct.
first the first thing is knowing the environment that you're in, that the decline of the population chiefly in America is something outside of, it's something that extends far beyond our subculture, for one, and for two, the drivers in which push these changes are um chiefly on, they're in the women's court. It's in their wheelhouse in order to decide and to handle, just based off of the architecture of the society as well as the cultural ramifications that have been put in place. So, with that in mind, when we get into, when we devolve into the conversations in regards to male and female dynamics, and you talk about our culture and talking about some of the brokenness and um, how our light is being manipulated, I wanted to pull up another video, and it's an older video, but I think it's important to observe as far as insight. There is an individual who came out. She was promoting a book. Some of you may know her as Ayanna Van Zant. She was really good friends with Oprah, and the title of her book was called "The Spirit of a Man." And it's the spirit of a man, the transformation for black men and women who love them. And so before we delve in and start breaking these boards for this video, I want to use this video to illustrate the idea of how in our community, the way that it gets turned on its head, this concept of um, men being responsible for things that are simply out of their control and that they have no rights toward in regards to making decisions for, but are given 1,000% of the responsibility, and being able to, hit that nail on the head and call out what's it called, the trickery that's involved, because I think that one of the last common threads that our women in particular who want to abuse and manipulate are essentially our emotional core is through the fact that we've been raised in this environment to serve our women. And so, as a matter of fact, let me see if I can pull something else up really quick, because I think it's a good supplement. I'm gonna let you rock while I pull this up.
Seems like we got a sister to provide some chuckles for us today. Ultraviolet Mars said, Miss Rhonda, LOL. And she continued on to say, found out last year that, that isn't even her real name.
Man, hilarious.
Welcome to the dojo, Ultraviolet Mars.
Oos, welcome to the dojo. So,
interesting times we are in.
Interesting times for sure. So before I jump into this video, because I do want to, provide perspective. So we went global with it, right? We're going to pare it down to the individual, because that's what we like to really discuss and dissect around these parts. One of the matter of fact, that's not even a word. One of the areas of vulnerability that black males have that I've noticed individuals will try to exploit is the fact that we have compassion and that we will lend a ear or try to help individuals even at our detriment. And a part of our healing process is being able to discern between when is it feasible to help and be able to be of assistance to somebody versus for those who want to be strict about it, like letting them go or cutting them off, um, basically deciphering between those two, because that is the last linchpin, in my opinion, or one of the linchpins that is used against us all the time because of our traumatic, experience just here, just the black male experience here in America. So we provided the overview in regards to what it is, in regards to population, in regards to some of the things that we face. Now we're going to talk about some solutions, just giving you insights. This was a cool little video. It illustrates 7 types of people you can't help. And I think that this is a quick video. I think that it'll be pretty good to check in. Just so then when brothers, you're dealing with people on your day to day, you can give an observation and just give an assessment on, being able to share your light, because I think that point of compassion and that point of help comes from, a spiritual place, like from the sacred black masculine, and what Dr. T. Hassan kind of alludes to, that all black men have the capacity to feel for, because we understand trauma, we understand pain inherently through the things that we deal with. And so I think that this will be a good launch pad and a good, observation to add to your lexicon. I'll probably drop the link in the video, but it's 7 people that you can't help. And this is on an interpersonal level.
Hey Psych2Goers, and welcome back to another video. Thank you so much. Your love and support has enabled us to send your way another wealth of everyday psychology. Hurting you in the end? Let's explore. Have you ever tried to help people who only ended up hurting you in the end? All too often, you try to change the ones you love because you think you see the good in them that they can't see in themselves. We make the mistake of assuming that everyone wants to be better and grow beyond where they are. But trying to help someone who can't even help themselves can feel a lot like taking 1 step forward and 10 steps back. Some people just don't change, especially if they don't want to. To help you identify them, here are 7 common types of people you can't help. Before we begin, we would like to mention that this video is for educational purposes only. It's not intended to target or shame anyone, but to help everyone be more aware of our tendencies. If you find yourself relating to the points we mentioned, remember that admitting our faults is the first step to correcting these self-defeating behaviors. Number 1, victim-minded people. Do you know what it means to have a victim mindset, or to always be playing the victim? Have you ever come across those perpetual naysayers who are always looking to make excuses for their own bad behavior? This is what we call those who are forever pinning the blame on everyone but themselves, especially when things go wrong. They lack the emotional maturity to own up to their mistakes and hold themselves accountable. Their own
Woo!
Feel free to chime in, brother. Let's go. This is what it's about, man. We hitting all cylinders.
Boom! Boom!
Does that sound familiar, fellas? Because
Mm.
here today we deliver the
Yoga
flame.
flame.
So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
you have dealt with one of these individuals a time or two in your life. And interestingly enough, they happen to be in your own backyard. Some of you brothers in your own houses and or apartments. Sometimes on your block, and they try to find their way into your life. However, it's your fault that they found their way into your life. It's your fault. Not the fact that they broke the windows and climbed on in and then said you forced them to be here. But hey, look, you doing the work. Sister Ultraviolet Mars said she used these videos for self-reflection, and more power to you. You are definitely on the upward spiral of growth and ascension. And I shall keep going.
That's what it's about, man. That's what it's about. Because what resonates with me is that the individual themselves lack the emotional maturity to see their own faults. And I think that something that I've noticed, especially when we get into concepts about the world as we know it, right? Some people want to call it black pill, call it red pill truth, um, because they haven't addressed a particular issue within their lives. They will
Mm-hmm.
use a scenario or any scenario and flip it to their advantage in an incorrect way. So they'll take a piece of truth and they'll misapply it in a particular scenario where they are actually accountable in the situation and try to place all the blame on societal forces within themselves and ignoring the pieces that they could themselves actually use.
Well, come
Or
on now. Come on now, brother. Just look at your screen. Look at this posture. Look at this body language. Look at the caption on here. Now I'm the bad guy. Where have we heard this language being used before?
Mm,
Where have we seen it in multiple iterations or adaptations, if you will, because these things occur on multiple streams and or panels and other forms of the political spectrum. This
mhm,
now I'm the bad guy in whom we associate the imagery, right? Because from a standpoint, I always hear I'm not a bad person, and it comes from a particular group.
mhm,
When you listen to them speak long enough, usually between 2 to 5 minutes, they completely disregard their sense of accountability and show you that the level of maturity isn't there. They also forget that they are what they attract. And when you point these out to them with help, you're trying to guide them. We've seen this with Kevin Samuels, basically, like with the women that call into his show. They call into his show, this man's show, for guidance and answers. And then the moment he starts putting the mirror in front of their face, this is the posture that they take. Now I'm the bad guy. It's not even the bad, and notice, not even the bad girl, but the bad guy. So much that you don't even want to be yourself. You don't want to be the individual you see in the mirror. And maybe it could just be a term of phrase and you're using it as the term of phrase. But I do think that there's a little more to be expounded upon there.
yeah. I think that, yeah, emotional manipulation at its core, I think that this is what this is addressing, especially when we start talking about, when we start combing through traumatic events or bringing up historical accuracies to the table. Navigating when individuals pop up with these types of archetypes or personalities is important, and being able to identify them, because constructive information ends up being lost due to emotional manipulation by individuals, intentionally or unintentionally, just based off of the trauma that they've received. So when you see an individual, or at least when I notice individuals who aren't able to take accountability when they bring up scenarios or make statements, when they make statements that are not nuanced or don't have any context to them, knowing that at their core it's an emotional immaturity problem, and for all intents and purposes, because I do want to add a disclaimer, it's definitely good to bring these up in private, but having it done in person, that's a whole nother thing where they'll play off of that as well. These are things to keep mental note of, especially when you're trying to, when the goal or overall outcome is to have a constructive conversation or bring a conversation forward. Keeping these mental notes of these types of individuals, so then you can navigate around it, so you can get to the core of it instead of biting on these emotional traps that they try to set up, is really the overall goal that we're trying to strive towards. So,
Correct.
but yeah, we can keep it rolling. Keep it rolling.
Actions have led them to where they are now, but they refuse to see it. So no matter how hard you try, they're never going to change, because in their eyes, Nothing is ever their fault. Number 2, self-righteous people. Narcissistic, egocentric, and sanctimonious. Have your pick. Such self-righteous people are know-it-alls.
Man, the
Nothing at all.
this imagery is interesting. The
Facts.
poses,
The poses.
the poses, like, come on, let's really look at the imagery, fellas. The poses that are set. I don't know. I don't see certain individuals striking these poses, but I digress. We can keep the footage rolling.
Help change or improve about themselves. Well, good for them. In fact, most of them even think it's everyone else who needs to step up and get better, not them. If only they knew. Their pride and
Pause. The most educated in the United States, the most educated can't be told nothing. Man, they need a high value. They need them a high value what?
High value concubine.
Uh-huh.
Look at the energy. Get to my level.
I need the right love, energy, and frequency. He's just not up to. He can't match my fly. That's some of the things you hear, but let's keep going.
Yep. Yep. So yeah.
This leads to their defensive and condescending attitudes. Every time you even try to point out their flaws or their shortcomings, their severe unwillingness to change comes from deep down inside, where they're afraid to confront their own insecurities and see themselves as anything less than perfect. Number 3, deceptive people. Dishonesty and deception, the greatest evil for any relationship, right? Often charming and persuasive, especially when they need something from you. Deceptive people cannot be trusted because they act one way in public and another in private. They're two-faced and manipulative. They tell you lies, cheat you, and even trick you into siding with them. Alas, you end up doing favors for them or giving in to their demands without even realizing it. Oh boy. Next time you're
Wait. Play that animation back. I wonder if the brothers in the building caught what just happened. Look at this exchange.
Faced and manipulative. They tell you lies, cheat you, and even trick you into siding with them. Alas, you end up doing favors for them or giving in to their demands without even realizing it.
Oh, I know a perfect car individual. That's always willing. I'm just saying.
He said, "I'll feel your way through it, huh?"
With the ideology, not the individual, but the ideology alone. And this is literally an illustration of the ideology being practiced, in which we understand how certain individuals operate. And this is an interesting depiction for us to actually look at, because it only solidifies that what we have observed initially isn't just, it's not make-believe. Maybe it's not Maybelline, you know? So we're seeing this in real time, and then it's being used as a form of imagery to convey a message or convey messages. Art imitates life. So we have to keep that in mind, brothers. And when you look at this imagery, what are the things that come to mind? What strikes you about this? Do you can you grasp what's happening here in this current depiction that you're seeing? And see, even in the full look at with all the nuances they even included with the phones in hand. You know, sounds like a lot like there's a little bit of text action going on. There's some intent that's clear. There's some genuine pure heartedness here. And then at the end of the road, we get the true and notice. Wow, I didn't even peep the whole. Oh man, the upside down heart
pan out the denigration towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's like that green room when you have those shows when they in the green room.
Mm-hmm.
That's man, she finna do my man Greenleaf filthy.
Greenleaf.
I mean, look, she's a wilted rose. Wilted rose is about to do my man Greenleaf filthy.
Boy, that's that high value man.
He all pure hearted. I feel so sorry for little poor Greenleaf, man.
Man, it's a good illustration. Somebody who's green to the, who's green, who's new, and not knowing that, an old rose has been around the block. The manosphere at large, the space at large talks about the level of manipulation, and everybody's that one step away. This is what it looks like as a case study when you're having these intimate interactions, and you thinking in public it's one way, but in another, this is actually an example of how you can be manipulated emotionally, because emotions they aren't as binary as fact. And so when you look at these interactions, finally caught, I missed you, I'm so lucky to have somebody like you, playing to the I'm feeling really sick, but I still have tons of homework, I can help you, you should read, like when we talk about individuals who come into this space who are like super hard body, and then people come into this space who they claim to be, cutthroat about, and they give a sob story and they just play on their emotional strings, the suggestive emotional strings. This is how you end up getting manipulated, right? And then watch this. I can always count, and then them reinforcing it, and then boom. This is the part that they try to point. This is the part that this space tries to point you to. When that mask is removed, this is the part that they're trying to.
And look at the wilted rose, man. This is you could tell this rose don't want to be happy. It don't want to grow.
It don't.
This rose don't want to grow. And look, Ultraviolet Mars, she said, "Bless your heart, Greenleaf."
Man, look at it. Look
at him. All the dream, because I rock Kentucky blue on the hoe.
Look at him. This is the when you talk about plantation politics, this is applicable. This is an applicable case study of that without our culture tied to it. But how many times have they wanted that that high value man, and this is the position that they want them in,
Hold on, but peep the rose though. Peep the wilted rose. It's sticking up slightly, a little bit. It's still facing down, but it's sticking up just a little bit when she's trying to be nice. This is her trying to enact her femininity. That rose that elegant rose archetype, she's trying to portray it. But if you actually look at it and you observe it, it ain't there.
Dog, that SMV, that bad boy about to expire.
It ain't there. More on that later.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's keep it rolling.
Without even realizing it.
Say, can I have some cash? Got him.
So, next time your gut tells you someone asking for help can't be trusted, it's important to be sure of their intentions before you lend them a hand. Number 4, desperate people. Ruthless, cunning, and opportunistic. Call it what you want. A desperate person moves you to pity them and begs you for help. But beware, don't fall for it. These kinds of people are willing to do anything and everything just to get what they want, even if it means stabbing you in the back. They don't respect your boundaries. Rather, they abuse your generosity.
I think that was a gem that needs to be reiterated.
Don't respect your boundaries to get what they want, even if it means stabbing you in the back. They don't respect your boundaries. Rather, they abuse your generosity.
Fellas, when we talk about BMI, Black Male Independence, and BMA, Black Male Agency, setting your boundaries and whatever those boundaries are important to not only a successful relationship with the woman that you decide to interact with, but individuals abroad. I know that the space tends to specifically focus on, the male female dynamic, but this is an important object lesson outside of that in general, even when you're doing business and making sure that people respect your boundaries and that they aren't emotionally manipulating you. And that desperate archetype, which I'm pretty sure we've seen iterations of that in different forms and fashion, especially in this era when we talk about the era of the diesel coming online, and that people, who are economically disadvantaged and, they have no place to stay or live, that level of desperation and just being able to survive kicks in. How the person that you're interacting with may not be the person that they are authentically, and you may end up being victimized off of your under a different pretense, um, just because you've decided to take on this person's problems or deal with, said person. So I think that this is one of those important pieces too, as well as um, in general, in talking about your overall emotional health, is setting up healthy boundaries, because things are going to get turbulent. Sorry to say.
Correct. And I would also add to this illustration, and it's always interesting. I like seeing symbols and imagery because this is the direct result of pouring your light into a porous vessel. You pour your light and you are now drained, and you are robbed. Your energy is robbed by these, these blood suckers or energy vampires, if you will. And you notice, look at the language. Anyways, here's our new assignment. But you have the box prepped up and ready to go to hand to the individual who's no longer have enough strength to do so. So you're willing to beat a dead horse, even if it means you get to feel a little better about yourself. Really look at this imagery and think about situations in which some of us have been in this position. And now this is being shown to you in real time as a demonstration of what we're explaining and conveying, to pass along a lesson so that this doesn't occur again throughout your history, brothers. Don't let it happen again, and value your light. And I see, let me just check in with the chat here. I see Ultraviolet Mom getting a little deep on us, man. She said the wilted rose is some deep symbolism for me. You know how women used to call their nether regions flowers? Well, her flower is no longer in bloom, hence why she goes about using green leaf.
Mr. Greenleaf, man, protect yourself, protect your light, protect your light, King.
Photosynthesis must occur, and you can't give that light away to nobody else.
That's bars right there. And at a deeper level, they don't respect you, especially if, even in this circumstance, when you have no more light to give, they put that expectation on you and coerce you to they abuse your generosity, and they abuse your light if you allow them to. This is why setting boundaries is important when you're talking about helping individuals, because culturally it's been accepted that any type of shame, we've been conditioned to be averse to any type of shaming language or criticism. So even if you would be in your right to preserve yourself, you would still be considered selfish if you don't sacrifice your entire being to this person. And for those who've been following the dojo, this ties back to what we talked about in the Man Not, and discussing our role culturally is we are reimagined flesh. So everything about your flesh is her property in her eyes. So this is why she's able to feel, have this callous disposition towards your emotional being, and being a drain on you because in her eyes, you're an object and you're not a person. You're an object to be exploited and not an object to be respected at the very minimum, for the fact of, your problems are not my problems. And culturally, we've been conditioned to be taught that, our counterparts' problems are always our problems. So the minute that they become uncomfortable, it's automatically on you to fix it, which is not the case. And this is what the importance of having BMI and BMA in your philosophy and just your value system and setting boundaries comes into play, because culturally, this this is no different than, what we're dealing with. We can apply this to what we're seeing today, where it's like we need black men to save us because reasons.
Exactly. It ain't happy wife, happy life, brothers. It was never the case.
Never.
It's
So
bright light, happy life. So protect
mhm. Facts. Protect bright light, happy life. There it is. That's the slogan right there.
protect that.
Um, because otherwise, I mean, and you know what? I do want to give flowers to the brothers who didn't have the agency before us, and had to pick up the slack of, being stepdads and disrespected and, just marginalized as an object, to just expected to just do things off of the strength because of reason, and tying your biological nature to a cultural incentive that that was being exploited. It's like, nah, that's not how it's going down, bruh. um Set your boundaries, and if they're not able to respect those boundaries, they basically are telling you that they can't respect you, which really ties to they can't respect themselves because they were in a desperate position, off rip. And so how they treat themselves will be a good indicator of how they will treat you. Um, which ties back to, that healing factor, and how you interact with individuals, because there's a lot of, just based off of the archetypes that we've seen alone, they can be applicable in any walk of life, but especially somebody that you're deciding to be intimate with or deal with, somebody that, they'll have a lot more access to you. It'll be a lot more of a challenge to, deal with that on the post end and trying to set boundaries instead of doing it before, just so then the precedent is set, so then you can work on being constructive, or, find an individual who is interested in that type of, lifestyle, if you want to go that route. But we can let it go. We can keep this ball rolling.
Time and energy. The worst part is they're always asking for favors, but never paying you back.
Wait, paying that back. Paying that back, Miss Coast.
Yeah, I got you.
What she said, this is our assignment. I've done my part bringing you the baggage. Done my
Facts.
part bringing it here.
Hmm.
Want, even if it means stabbing you in the back. They don't respect your boundaries.
Oh dear, you look terribly sick.
Rather, they abuse your
Anyways, here's our new assignment.
generosity, time, and energy.
Don't let them abuse your lights. Not your lights. Don't let them abuse your light, y'all. Don't let them abuse your light.
The worst part is they're always asking for favors, but never paying you back, and they have no problem using your good nature against you. So, instead of wasting your time trying to help someone like this, staying as far away as you can is probably the way to go. Number 5, disloyal people. Are they quick to get angry at you over the littlest things? Or maybe they pick fights with you over nothing. Some people are just too disloyal for you to help. Though you may think that they're your friends, the truth is, you don't want someone disloyal in your life. They'll take other people's sides over yours, or talk about you behind your back. They're unwilling to change and be better because they don't really care about you enough to try. They're more likely to lose interest in you and move on to something else, rather than own up to their faults and learn from them. Number 6, doubtful people. You might as well try moving a wall, because it's that useless trying to help such people. Difficult to understand and accommodate. They're skeptical of everyone and everything good that comes their way. They're distrustful, pessimistic, harsh, and judgmental. And they never go along with any of your positivity, gratitude, or optimism because they'd rather sulk and criticize everything. And the worst part is, it probably won't be long before you start acting the same way too. Because if you get too close to people like this, they could end up getting in your head and filling you with doubt as well.
The injection of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
the swallowing of light. That's what's happening here. That's what's occurring in this instance, this frame. But you can't allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us brothers, we go into what's called monk mode, where we no longer have to deal with, or that's like a preventative measure in which we want to look inward and reflect and grow beyond without running into potential individuals that seek to swallow up light. And it's not an easy road, so I do want to put that disclaimer out there. It's not an easy road for some, and it's not for everyone. But as you are shining on people or individuals and they wish to snuff your light out, you can't let that happen. So don't ignore these signs.
Well said. It ties back to what Robert Greene was alluding to, not even alluding to, but what he stated with Law 10 and, avoiding unfortunate and unlucky individuals, because inherent subconsciously you'll pick up on the the energy and the attitudes of the people that you're around. It's under extreme circumstances, and it had to be, even the best psychologists and psychiatrists have their own psychiatrists and psychologists that they have to vent to. I think that, matter of fact, shouts out to Shop Talk Live, when he mentioned that as well. When you talk about dealing with emotional trauma, especially um, in the context of therapy, the people who are therapists, they have their own set of trauma that they've experienced or have exposure to, or that they've felt before. For one, but for two, when you are hearing other people's problems, some of the most out there things, when the most darkest, deep darkest secrets that people share, um, that still has to be offloaded and processed. Um, and tying back to these people who are doubtful, especially if you're one that's trying, if your goal is to try to help them get out of that rut. Some individuals, they have to stay in that rut in order for them to find their own light out of it. And you end up catching some of the brunt of it in the midst of you trying to help them. And it's usually painted to brothers that you're not, like, they'll equate when somebody emotionally dumps information, or stress and anxiety on you, to your level of fortitude, and your level of masculinity or manness. And that's something that needs to be called out and challenged, within our cultural expectation, from a cultural expectation standpoint, because that's not the case. In any individual, regardless of race, when you have something heavy on your heart, or if you're always under stress, there's going to be a break point. And I think that it's not talked about enough, and there's not enough outlets where brothers can have that place where they can vent from all of the stresses that they deal with on the day to day, that they, whether they want to or not, they've been given. I think it was another stream that was fired up. I think it was either on the Roger Report, um, And the idea or the concept, I think BGS mentioned it, about emotional labor, the emotional labor that it takes to be in a relationship. And that, when you're interacting with a woman, or women in general, it doesn't even have to be like a girlfriend or wife, but your mom, or sisters or whoever, if there is them needing a male figure to emotionally unload on, um, as part of a type of ritual, those occurrences, all of that has weight to it, and there is a cost to it. And that light, going back to that light again, when you deal with those individuals who are in these types of attitudes, your light is what is spent in that, to be able to try to deal with that, because
Right.
that takes a certain amount of pressure to add to it.
Don't let
But
them bleed on you, man. Don't become an emotional tampon. They bleed their darkness onto you,
hmm
their chaos onto you.
turn into venom out here.
Exactly.
Shit,
This is well.
shit.
Put a pin in that. We could address that later.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up. We almost done.
Number 7, quitters. Finally, but perhaps most importantly, if you have someone in your life who's a notorious quitter, you're better off staying away from them than trying to change them. Whether it's a relationship, a career, or a personal goal, they can't commit to anything to save their life. No amount of kindness, generosity, or encouragement will get them to change their ways because they're so stuck in their loser mentality. They think that whatever they'll do, they'll either fail or need to work hard to succeed, so they'd rather quit while they're ahead than try in the first place. They're flaky, inconsistent, unmotivated, and usually just good at the beginning. It just isn't right giving your all for someone who isn't even willing to put themselves out there. So if they themselves aren't willing to change their ways and be better, then holding on to them will only leave you hurt, frustrated, and emotionally drained. And life is too precious to waste in the wrong company.
Mm.
We
And
hope
that's
we were able to give you insight into some of the ways that you might be wasting your time and energy trying to help certain kinds of people. Do any of these describe your experience?
all right, and that's pretty much it. Um, let's see, brother Seventh, you still there with me?
Yes, sir. Still here. Just
All
doing a
right,
little bit of the background technical checks.
no doubt, no doubt. All right, I see you saw that. So I'll wrap it up on that video. I wanted to bring that video into play to illustrate a component of protecting your light, especially on a day to day. Um, because as we do this broadcast to the dojomen of the space, um, we know that we only get your time and attention for as long as we're broadcasting, and you have your own struggles, you have your own challenges, you have your own tasks that you need to deal with. And, although we can't reach out to every single one of you individually, um, something to keep into account in protecting your light is understanding the personality types that are around you, or that can be around you in general, and being able to identify them and being able to manage them for the sake of your own um, mental sanity and inner peace. Because if not, I mean, we've seen the result time and time again, where our light is exploited. We're given an undue amount of stress and pressure, and on an intra level, on an intra communal level, everybody has identified that, yeah, as black male in society, it is going to be tough. Everybody acknowledges it, but hardly give an active solution to put into practice and trying to manage it and cope with it. Usually we're left to our own devices. And so a part of the light protection protocol is, part of the light protection protocol deals with being able to manage personality types and being able to heal yourself on the fly, in a sense, because we don't have the luxury to stop and heal, to where 100%. I don't think anybody has that, luxury, even outside of our race. But what we can do is identify some of the key indicators as far as personality types that can develop based off of how our society has been constructed, as well as how you know normal human behavior patterns are constructed, and then move from there. So then when you do encounter these folks, you're able to see through the emotional manipulation tactics, because that in my opinion is the biggest piece, that the biggest piece to the puzzle that tends to get overlooked or ignored. On the man side, it's usually like, yeah, we know things are messed up, just drive through it. But it's not a roadmap or a guide isn't given in that. It's just, yeah, just do you. We have to do this, this vague task of healing yourself, and there's no actual roadmap to build from. That video, it's on YouTube. Probably drop it in the link. That's a good place to sit and have self-reflection. I definitely recommend it as a quick set aside, to look at things in general and see how it applies to you, because the mannerisms and the personalities may be customized to our culture, but at their essence, they don't change. And so we all know deceptive people. We all know manipulators. We all know folks who are in a sense of desperation. And, we know people who know how to emotionally abuse our kindness, and being able to manage that and interact with those folks is key, because you can't go binary and just cut all people off, because even if you left the community, you're still going to deal with people who may fit that archetype. They may not be your same skin color, but the behavior still remains the same. And so this is a part of your own self-healing, and knowing that, hey, if you've been dealing with in the words of Alan Roger Curry, manipulative time wasters, or desperate people for a certain amount of time, you're going to have a personal behavior or reaction to it that you may not even know. Where it's like, wow, the minute somebody starts talking about, how, they came up from the mud, and how they need, there's just this extra $5, although that they've historically have been habitually delinquent, and growing from that standpoint, and that's just been their hustle in a sense. You be able to discern between how you can actually help the individual. Their role, they may not need cash, because cash is actually reinforcing and enabling the behavior that is undesirable, which is them having this poverty mindset, or having this this desperation mindset, where they're trying to exploit people. And so making sure that you're not a victim in yourself, and that you don't get exploited because they just see you as an object, as well as if you want to go that extra mile, because I know that as brothers, we've all been given that call, explicitly or implicitly, to take care, take care of one another, or take care of the community. So a way that you can manage that is knowing the types of individuals within the community that you're going to run into, because they're going to be there. There's a economic incentive that's stacked at the foundation of them being there, and for the stake of you being exploited off of that. And so once you have the lay, this is like the lay of the land, right? The first video gives you gives you the full context of what you're dealing with societally, on a societal level. This next one kind of the one that we just went through the individual, and sort of the reflection that you have to deal with on the day to day, right? And this final one that we're going to wrap up on deals with what that looks, what the exploitation looks like in real time, and being able to have a discerning eye, and observing it for what it is. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and this is going to be a final piece of our presentation. This is Ayanla Van Zant. She was promoting a book. It's called The Spirit of Man, The Transformation for Black Men and the Women Who Love Them was the name of the title. And just using it as a case study. Really, it's less about the book and it's more about identifying the behavior patterns that are prevalent in our community. Brother Seventh, I'm gonna let this run, and then if you want any commentary, just feel free to pause the video.
No doubt.
So, welcome to Connie Martinson Talks Books. It is no secret that in America there is the concept of jail being predominantly focused on Black men. It is also not unknown to think of the Black community as women with children, bringing them up alone. My guest today, Iyanla Van Zant, has written a brilliant book. It could be for people of any culture and color in America, but it's called The Spirit of Man, a vision of transformation for Black men and the women who love them. It's published by HarperCollins, and we'll be back after a short pause. We're talking with Iyanla Van Zant, author of The Spirit of Man, a vision of transformation for Black men and the women who love them, published by HarperCollins. Welcome, Iyanla.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This is a book that pulls no punches.
None.
We should tell our friends in the audience that you are also a lawyer, an accredited attorney.
Yes.
And yet you have had to suffer the fact that you had a father who committed suicide, and currently your only son is in jail.
Right.
Pursue how you got into what the Yoruba culture religion and how it will be helping them.
Well, I was raised, exposed to Yoruba culture through my cousin, who was like a big sister to me, and she was a dancer. And in the early 60s, she was a dancer at the World's Fair in New York with Michael Babatunde Olatunji. So through him, she was exposed to Yoruba culture and tradition. And through her, I was exposed to it. So I always grew up with a sense of knowing that I was a descendant of Africans, knowing that Africans did something other than swing from branches, and knowing that Tarzan wasn't the only thing that came out of Africa. So I had a real clear sense that as a woman, that there was a culture of people that looked like me, that had meaning for me beyond what I was learning in school.
But the male in the Black community has suffered through slavery, through masters, through a degradation that did occur as they came east.
And didn't have the knowledge of that culture, therefore believed that this was all there was.
Yeah.
That they were destined to a position of servitude, that they were destined to a position of degradation. And only as you begin to release pieces of yourself, pieces of your identity, pieces of your ancestry, pieces of your culture, could you be accepted into the mainstream world. And what I talk about in The Spirit of a Man is that you can have a culture that resonates in your being, in your DNA, and still be comfortable or accepted and at peace in the society that we live in.
You talk about a man who you call your godfather, but he had been your friend first as a child growing up.
His sister and I were best friends.
Oshun Kundi?
Oshun Kunle.
Kunle.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is a priest in the Yoruba tradition, and he taught me how to surrender my humanness and embrace my spiritual identity. And this was a very sharp contrast. He
taught me. This sister. I was gonna let her talk, but I had to highlight this moment. She is expounding on her journey, her willingness to, I'm going to say a bad word, submit. Ooh, cover my ears. Is it safe? But she is expounding upon her journey and willingness to submit and sharing her findings from said submission. She's able to reach higher planes of consciousness. And within doing so, she's going beyond her own level of understanding. She is not the one who is saying, so I'm the bad guy now, or I'm right and you're wrong. You know, mama's always right. Believe women. She's not saying none of that stuff. But let's continue.
I just wanted to add, I'm on her neck about that book title. Said they are flagrant. They was really bold. You remember the saying that they raise their daughters and love their sons?
I was waiting for it. Brother. And you know,
okay.
you beat me to the punch a little early. I had that board on the back burner. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to break that one yet.
All right, we can hold off on the break. I'm like, man, they so flagrant. I just wanted to put that out there. I'm like, man,
pay attention to the interviewer and what she said about the black man in particular.
Mm-hmm. All right,
and he's suffered through slavery and masters and a whole bunch of other things, and she's just like, yes. You notice there was no agency to thrust herself in the forefront of that, to put herself on the front lines of those statements and say, but we were too. What about us? She was not. This sister did not do that in that instance.
Yeah,
she held herself reserved, and she's not reacting. She is responding, which is completely different from reacting. What we see nowadays are more reactions. When you hear something you don't like, I'm talking to you, particular individual. I'm talking to the wilted roses of the world. You don't listen to understand and or respond. You listen, not actively, but you listen. You hear something completely different than what was just said, and you react because you want to convince us that it's okay to denounce all truth when it hurts your feelings or our feelings. That's okay. That's an acceptable behavior. However, it is not. And we here in the dojo belong to truth. And the truth of what we are currently seeing in this instance is that at no point in the conversation as we are viewing now is there a need to thrust herself in the forefront or the front lines or highlight herself in such a way that would be unbecoming of her character. Instead, she is expounding upon her willingness to submit and learning and going beyond her own understanding. Now, I will let those who view this in passing or, who are currently watching the 700 we have in the building, chew on my statements for a little bit before we get back into breaking some more boards. Shall we continue?
very sharp contrast to my father. My father, who was a number runner and a gambler and a street hustler and a womanizer, totally emotionally unavailable to me, doing all of the things that he had been taught men must do, struggling through that because he was a man of color in a hostile society. Whereas my godfather, also a black man, had a sense of being that my father just never seemed to have.
You have a list here of what you call spiritual transformation principles.
Yes.
Let's go through them very briefly, but willingness.
You've got to be willing to admit, number one, that you're not where you want to be, that there's something else you want, and that you've got the courage to go get it.
Awareness.
You've got to be aware of what it is that you do that keeps you from getting what you say you want.
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledge who you are, that you're not a victim, that you're not just a black man, that you're not just poor in the ghetto, whatever, but that you are a divine instrument of God.
Understanding.
That means don't get caught up in what it looks like. You've got to get beneath the surface and understand what is really going on.
Confession.
Yes. Tell the truth to yourself about yourself.
Yeah.
And then tell one other person. We don't acknowledge the things that we do that keep us in our own pain. We want to blame.
Surrender.
Give up your way, understanding that God has a plan, and God's plan for you is your salvation.
Forgiveness.
Sure, we've got to forgive. It's the only way to move out of the anger and the resentment and the guilt and the shame.
Commitment.
Make a choice about what you want and go for it.
Responsibility, and let's go a little further in that, because that's something that you talk about, the responsibility, especially for fatherhood.
Yes. Responsibility is being able to respond to the consequences of the choices you make. It's not just doing what America says you have to do. We are making choices every moment of the day. And when we don't consciously make those choices, what happens is consequences come up that we say we don't want. Or we don't want this to happen. And in our society today, not just in the African American community, but the whole issue of women having children without a man present. In some cases, it's a choice. That's a choice. So then the woman knows she's going to have to take care of that baby. She's going to raise it. She's going to provide for it. But when you make a choice to sleep with someone without using the precautions to prevent the child from coming, and the child comes, you can't then blame the person that you have the child, or you can't look back and blame the person who had the child.
As well as a precaution today.
Woo! It's getting hot in here. It's getting real
Yoga fire.
Hot in here.
Yoga flame.
My goodness. Run that back one more time for the class.
Have the child, going to raise it, she's going to provide for it. But when you make a choice to sleep with someone without using the precautions to prevent the child from coming, and the child comes, you can't then blame the person that you have the child, or you can't look back and blame the person who had the child.
As well as the precaution today of bringing forth a child with AIDS or HIV.
Absolutely.
Did you want to add to that, Brother Seventh?
Notice, because there is nuance, right? I said it is hot in here. And there is nuance to what's being expounded upon, right? Because in that instance, what she's explaining is throwing, because this was supposed to be about correcting blame, right? But if you catch it, if we're talking about, the C word, contraceptives or anything like that, there's a lot of steps involved before you reach a human life or another human being born into this world. And I think that that's something that's always neglected. You know what is 99.9% guaranteed to prevent
such a situation from happening, but you know, they're not big fans of it. Keeping that bakery or that oven closed.
Yes, sir.
Not mismanaging the bakery or oven or the womb. Mismanagement of the womb is what leads to, it is the main ingredient. Mismanagement of the womb is the main ingredient in the recipe. The destruction of the, Black family. Because when you delve into more ingredients added into that recipe of chaos and disaster, you introduce the removal. You tried to wing the recipe a little bit. You're like, oh, I want the Black family, the nuclear Black family, but let me I see this one ingredient that it says I need a father, but I think I could do it without. I think I could make the same cake if I remove the flour. I can do it. And it's going to taste just as great. It's going to be fabulous because I'm the one who's making it. I just got the eggs, but I don't got the flour. I got a little bit of the sugar, but I don't got the nutmeg. I don't got anything else, but I could just whip it up and it'll be all right. As long as I keep holding it together, even though I know it's missing something, the world gonna love this. They gonna come to my bakery every single time. So understand that we play these snapshots in history to investigate and or reflect on what it is that we are hearing in the way that it is being conveyed to us in particular. But let's move on.
Absolutely. But again, when we don't live consciously, we cannot respond to the choices that we're making. And what we do when we can't respond is we blame. We look outside of ourselves. Look what you did. Look what you made me do. Look what happened to you. And what I'm saying, particularly for Black men, to release the post-hypnotic suggestion with survival. Everybody's worrying about survival. You've already survived. You survived the slavery. You survived the oppression. You survived the discrimination. Can we now look to evolution, creation, institution building, and make choices that will move us in that direction and respond when we make the choices?
That comes in, of course, into your next quality, right action.
Yes, know what to do that will get you what you say you want. But see, the underlying issue here is that many Black men are afraid to ask for what they want. But there's a double dilemma because they're afraid to ask for what they want, but they can't admit they are afraid because men aren't supposed to be frightened.
And also, haven't they been in some way shortchanged in education?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only education in terms of the system, which I believe shortchanges everybody. It doesn't shortchange Black men any more than it shortchanges anyone else.
There goes that flat blackness again. You notice how the interviewer specifically called out the gross miseducation of Black men. Ayanla dismissively included every individual, and my thoughts on what she stated prior I take problem with, because again, first piece, the flat blackness that has been discussed in regards to Black males' plight, the undereducation that has been specific and targeted gets minimalized because the person who's our representative right here is making it as such. But when you look at the data empirically, it's grossly we've been grossly uneducated comparative to other groups that have been uneducated. by this system at large. So the way that she played that, that's one call out. The other piece where
because they're afraid to ask for what they want, but
And of course, into your next quality, right action.
yes, know what to do that will get you what you say you want. But see, the underlying issue here is that many black men are afraid to ask for what they want. But there's a double dilemma because
well, why are they afraid? And this is her response.
they're afraid to ask for what they want, but they can't admit they are afraid because men aren't supposed to be frightened.
And who sets up those cultural barriers? That's my question. It's rhetorical. That's the first piece. And the way that, again, the way that this gets structured on a societal level, it's these small nuances and jumps to conclusions that have to be called out. Where, yeah, you did acknowledge the problem, but your conclusive statement is what undermines the actual problem. So no, this is bigger than just male ego. Is that an element? Sure, but that's not the piece that needs to be vocalized and spoke on. In the same vein, when you talk about, I'm gonna let her speak because I want to make sure that my words are accurate. There's another piece that she said where separating the wheat from the chaff that needs to be called out here.
And also, haven't they been in some way shortchanged in education?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only education in terms of the system, which I believe shortchanges everybody. It doesn't shortchange black men any more than it shortchanges anyone else.
There goes that bag again. There goes that bag where, those individuals within our society who are able to exploit our misgivings and treatment by having an all-inclusive approach undermine the amount of neglect that we face socially to keep us at that permanent underclass. So that benign neglect type. This is like that benign neglect type of era that this footage was pulled from, if I recall correctly. There's another statement that she stated. There's another statement where she mentioned about black men acknowledging their healing, but moving forward and being able to build and all this other stuff, right? On surface, that sounds right on the money, right? But the way that it's being presented is disingenuous because when you get into the nuance and how it's created, you realize on an intra racial level that the folks that are perpetuating these tropes and perpetuating the trauma that we have to endure, um, they look a certain way, and they have to be held accountable in order for that healing to move forward. That call out has to be mentioned in order for that healing to move forward. And that's that's the elephant in the room. Everybody can state, yeah, the black man needs healing. Yes, BMs need to, step up and move forward. But the most crucial piece is what is the cause and what is the effect and how it's being caused. And it's deeper than just saying overt, racism, white supremacy, or just this one piece. We have to look into the actual nuance because just like in this presentation, you're given levels. There's levels to the human psyche and levels to human conditioning. So that one element that everybody can agree on an interracial level about cultural conflicts that can be spoken about because that's PC right now. But the part that isn't PC is the intra-racial call outs, because then you get into the argument about race disloyalty, which goes back to when we bring up those videos about emotional manipulators. They're able to play that fine line of emotional manipulation and drawing up charisma and trying to give misdirection to a legitimate problem that needs to be addressed in order to either A, maintain status quo, B, not being able to hold themselves accountable because they could be implicated in it, and C, all of the above, where you get both, best of both worlds, where the person in question gets their acknowledgement of their pain, but they don't get the actual resolution or solution, and they're not able to pinpoint one of the sources of that cause. which, you know, that's how you end up with this continuous disruption, and how your light ends up getting exploited. And how this is a perfect example. Folks getting book deals off of this, and giving their interpretation of what the psychology of your temperament is, and not having somebody who has been in your shoes give that same type of representation. And speaking of representation, and talking about, you know, having your interests pushed forward for you, um given this given this climate, the social climate, as well as given the whole issue of representation, and, you know, having moments like this where individuals are, you know, speaking on your behalf, but it may not be accurate, there is a counter measure, and there is a counter resource to that. And I want to bring light to it. I'm gonna put it in the chat. um there is a content creator by the name of Green Gorilla, and he is teaming up with a few other scholars, which includes but is not limited to Dr. Tommy Curry, um, and some other individuals, to actually call out some of this um, misandry, this cultural misandry that we deal with on a day to day. It's called the white people of black people. This is an Indiegogo funding to actually give an account of what black males are going through in an accurate manner. Got Dennis Sperling, got Dr. Ronald Neal, Honorable T.S. Johnson. So if you have a moment, go ahead and bookmark this Indiegogo link, because that is where the support and action can come into play when you see these types of instances pop up, when you talk about solutions to it. This is one of many solutions to addressing that, which is, you know, supporting the PhD, supporting the scholars who will speak on your interests. And so that link is here in the chat. Just wanted to drop that there. But again, if they aren't speaking for you, what you'll get is, you know, these half-cocked, um just a tad bit of truth for the sake of creating a sale type of products. And so this is your opportunity, this is your chance. But for now, we can keep the ball rolling. But that is something that I wanted to call out, because I don't want to be brass and say that everything is so, you know, incorrect. But there's inconsistencies and pieces that need to be separated from truth and propaganda. And so the truth that she's talking about, I'll leave that be. But the inaccuracies, those are the parts that I'm calling out, and that have to be addressed, and that has habitually happened and is pervasive in people's talking points unintentionally. And you end up shooting yourself in the foot, that need to be addressed. And it's part and parcel of, you know, your agency being able to identify those moments, so then accurate information can move forward, and all the other pieces that don't serve you and that are actually a detriment of you and can abuse your light are pushed to the wayside. But with that, you can keep it going.
Because of the antiquated principles, but more importantly, shortchanged about the truth of their identity. They're not just black men. They're not just poor black men. They're not just human beings who have to get a good education to get a job. They are divine and noble and perfect expressions of God.
Stillness.
Yes. Know when to stop efforting. Know when to stop struggling. Know when to stop pushing and competing, and just be still and let that quiet voice of divinity within you speak to you and give you direction. But we're taught in this society, you got to be busy. The busier you are, the more important you are. And all men want to be important, so they get real busy doing and instead of being.
You say a wonderful line that you have taught your daughters to ask any man they're involved with, What are you bringing to the table?
Absolutely. And I think it's important as women, and as the book says, for Black men and the women who love them, regardless of color, background, whatever, because very often we have expectations of men that are totally unrealistic when we look at who they are and when we understand who we are. You know, as women, we put demands and expectations on them that have nothing to do with who they are. Whether a man has a big car, a big house, or a big job, that's not the issue. Does this man make you happy? My barometer is, does he buckle your knees?
Mm-hmm.
And if your knees are buckling, okay, then you have to look and say, okay, what is it that I want to do with this man? Do I want to build? Do I want to create? And what is he bringing to the table that makes this dream a reality? Now, if you want to build a multi-million-dollar corporation, don't marry a man who doesn't have a high school diploma. And then become disturbed with him when he can't do what it is you say. What is he bringing to the table in relationship to what it is that you say you want in your life?
How difficult was it for you to go to Medgar Evers College?
Yes.
And then get
Man. I almost wanted to give her a perfect until the last piece came out.
It's a little bit of a compliment sandwich, but
facts, compliment sandwich.
I just want to give a big shout out to Charles, and I want to make sure that we are honoring this brother's strong message that he delivered straight to the dojo, to a strong 2021 and future to the dojo. Keep going. So with that, I got to give him a bit of fanfare, right? So he gets the
Tiger. You win. Perfect.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, fellow dojoman. Appreciate the support.
But man, they say you have to be coachable. Sometimes you're too old to mold. Sometimes the clay is too old to mold. You try and get all the air bubbles out, but some of them sneak up in there, you know? What we're going to do?
I don't like misandry in my compliment sandwich.
I concur, brother. I concur.
Extra gynocracy sauce.
I don't think it tastes too good. It don't taste good at all. But again, that's what happens when you get the chef who wants to cut corners. Shortcuts lead to shortcomings, you know. And if you're gonna start removing ingredients and think you could wing it, hey, by all means.
Just doing the most, man. I like to keep my compliment sandwich simple. You just had to throw extra sauce on it that I did not ask for. Now it's just a soggy sandwich. It's just a soggy sandwich. I'm just looking at it like this is what I paid for.
You gonna like this? Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Facts. Anyway, keep it rolling.
Get your law degree at SUNY New York.
As difficult as I made it, it was as difficult as I made it. It was as difficult as I kept telling myself, I can't do this. It was as difficult as I kept telling myself, this isn't going to work and I can't afford this and nobody cares anyway. But the minute I start supporting myself, the minute I started, you can do this, girl. You can get this done. This is okay. Yes, it's hard now. But see, in this society, we're taught about instant gratification. You know, pop it in the microwave and boop, it's out. You can't get a law degree like that. Okay.
And
4 years of college.
Which is a
That's
tough
right.
school.
3 years of law school. So we have to learn how to support ourselves. And as women, if we learn how to support and build and nurture ourselves, we won't have so many expectations of our men. See, when I started to nurture and love and honor and support myself, any man coming into my life had to live up to the standard that I had already set for myself. When I didn't have a standard or when my standard was low, I could accept anything. And then I get mad at him.
Talk about your son, Damon, because you do end the book with a letter to him. He
Yes.
is still in jail.
Yes.
Where
He's at God's Vacation Retreat Center in Roanoke, Virginia. Bodicott Correctional Facility, right outside of Roanoke, Virginia. And I say in the book that I wrote this book for him because I learned all the things he needed after he needed them. And I think as mothers of sons, regardless of your race or your ethnic origin, as mothers, there are things that we want to say to our sons that we just don't know how to say. There's things that we want to give them that we don't have to give because we're so preoccupied with survival and the physical world.
What are your thoughts on that? Break some boards. Let's get to it.
Nah, let's keep it rolling. Yeah. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, this sandwich. I'll let her keep making the sandwich. Let's see if she can save the sandwich. We'll see where she go with it.
That we don't give them the spiritual secrets that they need. And my son needed more support from me, more nurturing from me, more prayer from me than he needed my badgering and my controlling and my emotional manipulation. I was going to make him do what I wanted him to do because I thought that's how he would survive. And it turned out to be the exact opposite of what he wanted for himself.
You bring up in the book that he may have resented not having a male figure in the house.
He may have, but he didn't even take the opportunity to take advantage of what he did have in the house because I was so controlling. I didn't even let the child dress himself until he was 14. I did everything for him. I taught him where to go.
He may have. If you openly admitted that your recipe wasn't effective and it was the complete opposite of what the young brother wanted for himself, he may have. Sounds like you took away a direct need.
And
some would argue, at least she acknowledges that now. That's very smart and courageous of her to remember that now.
I just want to paint the picture. Her son is in prison, and she got a whole book that she got up off of him. This is the economy of the man not right here. Off of her neglect, and obviously this isn't knocking the self-reflection piece, right? Because I don't want that to be lost. In the midst of doing that, she was able to parlay a piece of literature and essentially secured a career off of her neglect and off of her trauma. And this is where the BMI principle and just being able to discern things come in at, right? Because is it initially off top, is it admirable that now that she's reflected on her mistakes, she's able to have this mental breakthrough, the spiritual breakthrough, and this is her redemption arc in the sense of paying it forward. Yes, that's one element. But the biggest piece or the critical a critical element of this is that this is the norm. This is the normal practice. This is a part of the design. This isn't an exception. How many stories have we heard of, individuals, sons, fathers, husbands being pushed to either being dead or in prison, and then the widow or the one who was essentially in the driver's seat the whole time off of neglect still being able to prosper from it. That's the condition, and that's the economy that we call out and want to reveal this entire time. And the whole cloak and cover up, the cloak and dagger behind it is when it gets covered behind, well, yeah, she did the best that she could, and you get into the generalities of it. The story itself, yes, it is admirable. However, the actual practice and the nuance behind it in order to facilitate this is a systemic design. I'm not even going to say it's a systemic problem. It's a problem for us because we're the ones that suffer from it. However, this is a systemic design in order to perpetuate and continue this political economy and cultural economy at length. And so when you hear brothers express themselves like they are now in these spaces, this is what they inherently, if they don't have the words for it, are trying to articulate. Is that the problem is you still are trying to love me when you should have been raising me.
Exactly. And what you brothers are currently looking at, this is a template of a meme. And I can't help but beg the question. Let's look at this butterfly for a quick moment. Is this black girl magic? Is what we just broke down black girl magic. You can see the butterfly has that flight pattern. That's a little all over the place. She openly admitted. Notice the butterfly's wearing yellow, just like the sister.
You ain't
flying all over the place. Misdirection.
So done, bro.
I'm a man of imagery. So is this black girl magic we see here tonight in the dojo, ladies and gentlemen? But I digress, and let's get back to it.
Imagery is important. Oh man.
I told him where to go, how to go, who he could go with, what to do when he got there. And I'm a woman, so I have a completely different sense of life than he did as a man. He needed a little more independence. He needed a lot more nurturing support. He needed me to trust him more so that I could teach him to trust himself.
Yvonne, would you read these 2 paragraphs from your book?
Yes, I would. And what would happen if from birth we began calling Black male children Dr. So-and-so or Attorney so-and-so? And what if by the age of 3 that child was told what college he would attend or what craft he would pursue? This would be supported by regular reminders. When the child was disobedient or misbehaved, rather than being spanked or punished, he could be reminded, you're not going to get into college acting that way. When he brought home good grades, he could be commended. These grades are excellent, just what you need to get into college or to be an expert carpenter. When the grades slipped, rather than criticizing or debasing the child for not living up to presupposed standards, why not remind him? A C is okay if that's the best you can do, but a C is not going to get you into college. In the end, the child may not go to the Howard or the Fisk or the Morehouse, but he would be conditioned to believe that he was going to some college. He would have a craft towards which he would aspire. He would know that he could be a doctor, a medical doctor, a doctor of education, or have any other career he chose to follow. He would know to be a carpenter, a plumber, a police officer is also an honorable way to live. The goal is to condition our children early in life that they are somebody other than what the world says they are. To implant in the subconscious mind, you are the brightest and the best, loving and lovable, valuable and worthy. This practice would give male children a frame of reference, a positive frame of reference that they could attribute to themselves. It does not mean that they would not hear negative commentary. It means that there would be something to balance the effects of such a commentary. Furthermore, we would prepare children early in life to be dedicated to something, perhaps lessening the attraction of drugs, sex, negative peer alliances, and lessening the interference of worthlessness.
Thank you.
Pause. Now, everything that you just said out of your mouth, sister, that was the role of that boy's father to instill. And there's some silver linings here, as you can see, because it sounds very nice. I don't know about being dedicated to something but I would feel a lot more confident in being dedicated to my purpose and helping me identify that purpose. As a young boy, that's something that I believe young, and as a young man now, I believe young boys would appreciate those in his corner to help him identify his purpose. Some of us are not privy to knowing what that is earlier on in life. Some of us are. But when you're surrounded or you're in an environment in which you're receiving mixed messages. Now, some may say, oh, but what she said about college is true. You can't get into college with a C. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And the idea of some college, while not striving to be the best, also rubs me the wrong way. I don't think I like that in my sandwich either, my compliment sandwich. What do you think, West Coast? Was that good? Was the extra mustard good?
Man, I think you hit the nail on the head, bro. In the midst of the compliment, there was still a level of objectification that was occurring, which, if I had to pick between the lesser of two evils, constructively objectifying your boys to being a particular role versus degrading them and abusing them and leaving them to their own devices or restructuring them, that would be the better choice, but it's still not the optimal choice. Which it culture, it takes time to build, and it takes time to construct. The something that I noted, or something I'm just noticing, is the fact that this issue is a perpetual issue, right? This was, if I recall correctly, I think it's dropped in like the 80s or 90s. So I was like born around this time. And the issues are still happening today. So I think that the broke genius brings up an excellent point about black struggle being a hustle.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that there's a there, in my opinion, I'm thinking that there's a parallel market, right? And that it's Burger King versus McDonald's. And the Burger King is the positive, constructive side of, what we want to call black society, which are, ones that try to encourage us and say, hey, we're trying to get to a more constructive level, and we need to build, and we need to, just giving all of these whispering these sweet nothings about how we need to improve and do better. But then on the opposite spectrum is the culture, which would be, the McDonald's, super popular, and everybody knows, everybody goes to it. That continues to cause said problem. And with the hustle, you need a supply and demand. And so, going back to just looking at her having this book and the state that her son was in at the time, because again, things may have changed up until now. I don't know what it's like 2021 with her relationship with her son, but I like to get his take or his perspective on his experience of dealing with this type of trauma, and even the fact that his mom's out there promoting this and trying to heal the nation in a sense without even healing the people in your house. Because, if I was in that predicament and I saw that, my mom's out there, pushing a book about how all black men need to, do better and stuff like that, I'd be offended. Because I'd be offended to a certain degree, because there's still a level of neglect that's happening where you've identified your problem and now you're going out to profess and evangelize that problem without addressing my needs if I'm like in the role of the son or whatever, right? But this is me thinking from my vantage point, not in the, in the traditional point of, most brothers would probably think, well, yeah, I'm in this situation, this is on me, and you know, I just need to man up and all that other stuff that has been fed and not given like an alternative view. But that's my given impression of this just interaction so far. It's just the nuance to it, or just the bigger picture of the fact that clearly a generational this is a generational trope. This is a generational thought and behavior pattern. Because right now, just swap out Ayanna Van Zant for insert, the current SJW that wants to advocate for us on our behalf, but not really a part of what we have going on, but is still reaping the benefits, which, that has been the hustle that has been maintained and in place. And so you have a role and you have a value culturally, which is to be exploited. And obviously, with the rise of this space, introducing BMI, BMA, and just that type of mindset, this will challenge it because there's an economic and cultural incentive to perpetuate that same mentality. Because the minute that you move away from it, those incentives are lost. But yeah, that's what with that, we can keep it going.
We're going to take a short pause and we'll be back. We're talking with Iyanla Van Zant, author of The Spirit of a Man, A Vision of Transformation for Black Men and the Women Who Love Them, published by HarperCollins. Iyanla, what do you mean by transformation?
Changing, taking the action required to change where you are in life.
You mentioned the Million Man March.
Yes.
Do you think it will last the effect of that day?
I think that if we put the principles to practice, we got so caught up in who called the march and who went and who didn't go and how many were there. If there were 10 people there and they walk away with a principle and a process that they can activate in their life to make them more peaceful in life, to make them better for life, then I say that the effects are lasting effect.
Do you still practice your legal work?
No, I'm dedicated now totally to the healing and the empowerment of humanity, but specifically the African American community.
Mm-hmm. You talk about making blessings on parts of your body.
Yes, particularly the head, because our heads are our 360-degree universe. Kind of, you can't do anything in a day unless you first have a thought. But if you don't trust those thoughts, and if you don't listen to those thoughts, and you don't know how to purify those thoughts so that those thoughts will guide you to your highest and your greatest good, then you've got a problem. So what I tell people to do is bless your head every morning, that you can hear yourself and trust yourself and know when your highest self is speaking. Most of us get up, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we put a hat on. We never say thank you for just being able to have a good thought about ourselves and about somebody else. So I think blessing your head is critical to being able to trust yourself.
And then
hindsight is 2020 and actions to be carried out in 2021. There's a lot of references to the head. Little about the neck. And I say this now, or I hone in on that point. Because in certain conversations, when we start talking about the head of the household versus the neck, and I don't mean to take this into too much into a religious conversation, but there's a point of contention about the hierarchy of controls, so to speak, or just what controls what.
the neck, right? In biblical sense, was a title or symbol granted to the woman, while the head was granted to the man. And then beyond the man, you have Christ, and then, or the Son, SON, and then the Father, SUN, or God. Insert, label of your choice. But in the head, there's a brain that controls everything else, every other aspect of the body. But in some conversations, the neck wants to be the head, but it can't, because it's not a head, it's a neck. And it's interesting when we hone in on the neck, and there's a particular chakra that I'm thinking about. It's in that area. It's the throat chakra, which is to speak truth. And when that chakra is blocked, deception and lies take place. And so you now hear individuals, you might have heard individuals ad nauseum who are supposed to be the neck and have heads of households and be accounted for, attempt to take the role of the head, thus blocking truth. And we're seeing a direct result of the blockage of such truth and acceptance of fallacy. I could break it down further on a later date for those that may not follow or picking up what I put down. That's just a piece I wanted to share. West Coast, if there's anything you would like to add, please do so. If not, carry on.
Man gave the big chop. Gotta salute fellow Sensei breaking boards, man. That was a really profound breakdown, bro. Real good. But yeah, we can keep this going.
And the next step is blessing other parts of the body.
Yeah, I think the eyes should be blessed, the ears, the mouth. I think that your legs, your feet, your arms. We walk around, people 45 years old never say good morning to their feet. But without their feet, they wouldn't be anywhere. Never say hello to your kidneys.
Is this part of the Yoruba culture?
Well, I was taught as a Yoruba that every single part of you is divine and holy, and that you have to honor all of the things that come together to make life good for you. My kidneys are sure an important part of my life, as are my feet, my legs. And I think in American society, very often we take things for granted. We don't bother it unless it bothers us. People get real concerned about their liver when they've got sclerosis.
Well, actually, what I'm hearing is culture is not dissimilar from...
I want to translate that a little bit further. Sometimes we take things for granted, like the head of our household. And sometimes we misdiagnose and ignore things the head of the household. And now we got a bigger issue, a broken family. And we got sclerosis. It's just all messed up. Son's incarcerated, father's out of the home. But everything is holy and divine. Amen. Amen. Let's carry it on.
Over here, the gynocracy whisperer.
Some of the thoughts today about alternative medicine.
Yes, alternative medicine and a holistic approach to living, not segmentizing. Oh, your intellect is one place and your spirit is one place and your body is someplace else. But in Yoruba culture, you are seen as mind, body, and spirit. So an illness in any one part of you will affect an illness in another part of you. One of the things that I say in the spirit of a man is no one has dealt with the spiritual healing of Black men. And that is where the core of the problem is, in the spirit.
The mother to the son?
Oh, critical. Those babies marinate in our bodies, just like you would marinate a steak in wine. So whatever is going on in our bodies, in our minds, those babies are marinating in it. And we know
like a steak and wine. Goddamn. Like a steak and wine. Now let's because maybe I'm being too critical here, but you were talking about parts of the body being divine. You mentioned the liver. You bring up wine. You bring up marinating the steak. You know, check a few scriptures. Some things we're not supposed to eat, but I digress at that point. But at the same time, is this a reimagining of flesh? Is this black girl magic? Man, I can't. Let me take my foot off the neck.
It's just a Beyond Beef compliment sandwich right there, man.
let me take the foot off the neck. Psych. Oh man, let's move on. Let's move on.
I think that as women in this society, that we are conditioned to be in a consciousness of subservience, a consciousness of fear, a consciousness of dependency. And then we have a baby in our womb, and we go into that fear and into that dependency and into that. And that's what those boy babies marinate in. So they come forward with an unconscious sense of fear, dependency, worthlessness, whatever it is that they marinated in. So I say it is critical that women heal their wounds so that they can get new information and pass it on to the sons.
But when the sons go into adolescence and joining the gangs,
a mother has a very special role, and it's not to go into fear. It's to see the good in that child. It's to pray for that child. It's to take whatever.
Pause. Oh shit. Let me look on the wrong train. She started off on the right track, and then it veered off, and I gotta stop it before the collision happens. Once that child is outside of you and is exposed to the elements and growth, and it is no longer attached to you. And you start to teach teach this life how to perceive the world around it. And it is too far from you when the child reaches knowledge of themselves. And in that particular moment and point in time, the question that was being presented, when he joins the gangs, where is that boy's father to bring him to order instead of lead him and let him marinate in that chaotic wine? But see the good in that steak, because the meat is almost ready, medium rare. It will be plated real soon.
It sounded like a department store after purchasing some product. It said no returns, purchase as is.
And for those that are listening, when I say her, I'm talking about the ideology, because it will always be her. The ideology.
Mm-hmm. It's not about
this individual. It is her, the ideology.
Yep.
In which I'm referencing.
Principalities, the principle behind what's being stated, because this isn't a personal attack. This is a criticizing ideological standpoints, because this is all over the place, and this is speaking from a son who has to weather said environment. This is why I think it'd be important, and it'd be pretty interesting to get the commentary or just mindset of brothers who have had to grow up in said environment without a father. And
Well,
then
you're getting it right now, brother. You're getting it right now. We're giving it right now, honestly. I mean, for those that know about my past and know about my situations, some of the stories that I've shared, I would be the son that she wished she'd listened to.
Mm.
And now I'm giving it to you.
But see, it's not about your voice, it's about her voice and her speaking on your behalf.
See,
That's the part.
and this is the thing, right? So now we're talking to it. This is he, not me, but he, him, the son, the SON, right? Speaking to her, the ideology, who admitted was in a dark place. And now I'm bringing my light to this situation, the direction. Since you were inadequate and you removed, you abused me. And when I say me, again, I'm talking about he, the SON, the son. You abused me as your son by removing my son, my SUN, my father. And thought that the moon principle was better. You thought that the thing that reflects sunlight was better than the original source. And now you've reached a point where you want to become, for lack of better words, a son, something you are not. But when an eclipse happens and the sun looks black, a black sun, maybe that is your true goal. The illusion of light that you believe you shine onto others. And again, I'm talking to her, the ideology, not the individual. I will keep reiterating this and writing it out on napkins if I need to, for those who will listen on.
Like you said, repetition is key.
And so, you wish to help humanity and heal others? Her, the ideology.
Mm-hmm. It may have to be
hold others, hold the other ones, the other hers, accountable. Prevent them from keeping the party going of her, the ideology. Let go of the reverence of her, the ideology. That her moon principle is the solution for sunlight.
Well said. And I know you've stated this before. Repetition is key, especially now. I think that the ideology, which is tougher to address on a day-to-day because it becomes instilled, has to repetitively be addressed and acknowledged and attacked and corrected, because these small, or what is perceived to be minor, issues end up being gargantuan to fix in the long haul if they aren't nipped in the bud. And it can easily divert into this is a personal attack, which is a tactic that is typically brought up as a deflection, where you're attacking this individual. It's like, nope, repeat again. Ideology, ideology, ideology. And the reason why we're addressing the ideology is because we experienced and lived through the ideology. And with that experience, we have feedback. And yes, our feedback is important because you created the environment that we had to live in, and thankfully we didn't make it. But there's a multitude of others that didn't make it through this program. And so we got to say it again and again, that the ideology, the program, because that's all we're talking about, that doesn't have a face. You can identify with your ideology, but your ideology doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a moral stance or preference. Does it work or does it not work? And we're giving you the feedback and saying that no, this does not work for the result that you state that you're intending to do. And so if that is what your outcome is, then we recommend a different course, not this. And the fact that we can pull this video up years later and it's still being applicable informs us that this is the ideology that we received proceeded before our forebears. And so we got to continually attack that ideology, and the people who want to identify with it, making sure that, hey, we love you. We have to love you from a distance. But as long as that ideology is there, then we're going to be on two different planes. And it's not an attack at your moral character, but this is a systemic issue. So
let's talk about it. For those that can see, I'm going to try to zoom in so you can actually get a full understanding of what we're looking at. Right? This is what you're doing. Her, the ideology. When you believe that you are the solution and can block out this here and say that my light is better. With the umbra or umbrage, right? The offense to your offspring that you deliver, the annoyance to your offspring that the offspring's growth that you have delivered for more than 3 generations. And it's interesting, right? They call that the umbra, but when you look at the word umbrage, the definition is annoyance or offense. And you would think that in the casting out or total blockage of male light, sunlight, or that divine masculine that can come from the Father being blocked, and now the umbra is being presented onto that child, that growing earth, that seed that's supposed to grow and flourish. But the umbra is an offense to that child. And it is a disservice to the son, S-O-N. That now you can get on a public platform and say, yes, I acknowledge my umbrage. I do. And now I wish to heal the rest of the world. I've neglected my own, but I think I have the capacity. I feel the capacity to heal the rest of the world. But 7th, at least she's smart that she has acknowledged her mistakes. And out of all the wealth, because again, we don't know the status of your son right now. I don't. Her, the ideology, not the individual. But out of the funds that you received, making a career off of your son, S-O-N, and off of your offense to him, your umbrage upon him, did you go back and remove that shadow? Her, the ideology, not the individual. I'm repeating it again. Because I think with every representation that we see, we've seen it in 2020, and it is quite the strong start in 2021. Will you her the ideology, if that is your desire to heal and nurture, hold others accountable and remove the umbrage or the umbra from the other seeds of potential. But I digress. Let's move on.
Well said.
To put that child in the most loving, protective, nurturing environment there is. A lot of times we as mothers will see things that our children are doing, and for fear of admitting that we've been a bad mother, we ignore it. We act like it doesn't exist.
You know, your writing is quite beautiful, Iyanla. So I'm going to ask you to read again, if you will. I believe that my life was going down the tubes.
Sure. I believe that my life was going down the tubes because I was a Black woman. I was poor because I was Black. I live in one of the roughest neighborhoods in New York because I was Black. My relationships kept falling apart because it's hard for two Black people to make it in the world. I understand that people are accountable and responsible for what they do, but it just seemed harder for Black people to get anything done because they were Black. Each day I did the best I could to raise my children, keep a roof over our heads, and make it through the world. Still, it seemed like I was getting nowhere because I was Black. The supermarket was always crowded in my neighborhood and never had what I needed. Of course, I attributed this to the fact that I was Black. The tellers in the bank moved slower in a Black neighborhood. The garbage collectors came less frequently, and the mail carrier came late in the Black neighborhood. When I looked around my immediate world, I concluded that everything that was not working in my life had something to do with my being Black. That made me angry. Angry people always believe they have a good reason for being angry. In most cases, they do. The key is to get angry, express the anger, and move on. When you don't know how to express what you feel, it stays locked up in your mind. Even when you are not aware of that hidden, unexpressed emotion, it will cloud your thinking and color your actions. What it also does is attract people and situations into your life that reflect back to you what you are thinking and feeling. I attracted angry people. My husband was angry. Many of my friends were angry. There was usually something going on in my life that I could be angry about, or someone I could be angry with. When you are as angry as I was for as long as I was, you eventually become afraid. I was afraid of what I might do to myself or someone else. I was afraid of what the angry people in my life might do to me if they got angry enough. I was afraid that what the angry world might do to my children because they were Black and poor and living in a neighborhood of poor Black angry people. Fear and anger make you weak. It makes you tired. I was a young woman, but I was always tired. Even when I was having fun, I was tired. Raising 3 children alone meant that I had a lot to do, but I was too tired to do it. I would have blamed my husband for leaving me with the children, but that would have made me angry. I wanted to rest, and I wanted the children to be quiet, and when they wouldn't be quiet, I got angry. I wanted to keep them I wanted them to keep the house clean, and when they did not, I got even angrier. I knew I was angry about being left with 3 children, but I also thought I was angry just at the children. Most of the women I knew were tired and angry. We would sit around talking about the things and the people that made us angry, which usually made us feel worse. There were times when we would make jokes about it and compare notes, but under the jovial, sisterly exterior was a seething rage, grounded in our disappointment with Black men that we sometimes directed at our children.
Brilliant. I mean, you know, whatever I would ask you, you have written in those 3 paragraphs. And the book is beautifully written.
Thank you.
Magnificent book. Iyanla, I thank you. And I hope it will resonate, and that for those who may not have the ability to read that well, that there will be audio tapes for them to hear.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I thank you. Will you autograph my book?
Absolutely, my pleasure.
It's a book that I hope will make a difference.
Yes.
If you'd like a copy of our publication, Good Books, send me a stamped, self-addressed envelope to Good Books, P.O. Box 69. 1640, Los Angeles, California, 90069, Los Angeles, California. And support your local library. Go in, take out a card. One thing libraries are today, totally colorblind. And they will help people who don't know how to read learn to read. They will have audio and videotapes for senior citizens. A very important book for our culture is by Barbara Mathias and Marianne French, 40 Ways to Raise a Non-Racist Child. And the first is to be able to give children of all colors hope, education, and don't try to pretend there isn't discrimination, because there is, whether it's from a financial point of view to a color point of view, there is. The point is to get over it. Meanwhile, again, take the children to anything that the library has for them, because usually you don't have to worry about it being PG or is it going to be acceptable. It will be a constructive experience. And if you have the time, take them to a museum. Won't hurt. And there are terrific children's museums all over the country. And they will have children learning how to make things, shape things with their hands, and have that gestalt connection of knowing they completed something. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much,
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I don't know about all of that now, sister. Completely different. 'Cause, you know,
Man, that lady, hey, she's scandalous. She said, maybe we can get the book in audio for those who can't read. Man, it's funny because it's like, bro, that type of dig, I don't know, something about those types of digs that just, it's just funny to me. The fact that a good portion of our population have been, it's funny in an ironic way. It's not funny in as in I enjoy it. Some brothers and sisters, they haven't been educated, or I should say brothers in particular, because our counterparts have been uh given the incentive and opportunity to be the most educated class. But the one that the actual book is targeted for is the part that I find ironically humorous, where she said, I hope that you have an audio for them, and then proceeded to add in additional addendums of literature to to overshadow, going back to the flat blackness, that, hey, once you get done reading about the black man's plight, then let's go back to how to teach all children to be non-racist.
and that message has changed over time. It's no longer non-racist, but accepting of everything, no matter how chaotic it seems. Everything is fair game. Accept everything.
Everything that we say. But yeah, I thought that this video is pretty interesting to do as a case study, honestly. And the idea of protecting your light really resonates when I watch this, because you'll have people who, at least in my purview, I'm not worried about the people who are explicitly against those of our hue in our class, but those who strive to quote unquote make a difference, or trying to help, or try to advocate on our behalf, is the ones that I'm paying attention to in this climate, because all it takes is a drop of truth and then a pound of lies to supplement it, to keep us in this, continual state of subjugation, to be honest with you, social subjugation. And for me, having these types of exercises helps, and hopefully this space, so then you can identify when somebody is trying to be disingenuous or unintentionally manipulating you. Because I think that, I, even throughout all of this madness, I think that there are, in some people's heart of hearts, really believe that they're trying to do the quote unquote right thing, and the actual right thing that they're advocating and fighting for is holistically detrimental to it's detrimental, and it's also inaccurate. I think that that's my biggest concern, is the fact that they're passionate about it, but their assessment of it is incomplete. It's inaccurate because it's incomplete, and it's very dangerous waters to go into, especially nowadays. Full force and like full of heart and passion, which is a good element to have, and not being fully informed. Because what'll happen is you'll end up, advocating for something that you didn't anticipate, if you know what I mean. But what were your thoughts on this, Brother Seventh?
Don't mix chemicals. don't mix chemicals. Her the ideology. Don't mix chemicals, because you're gonna get a reaction that you don't like. And for those who find themselves in her position but don't want to be labeled as her, and say they speak for the sons of our people, then hold her accountable. Hold her accountable. Remove the umbrage from the
Yeah.
sons, from the SUNs, the sons. Because when that light gets through to your son, SON, to the seed, when the sunlight gets to the seed, and it is able to flourish, they will become vibrant, and they will begin to grow beyond and ascend. And then they too can repeat the cycle of planting seeds and becoming a sun, SUN. If healing is what you say you desire, it's the words that leaves your lips. It's the action you take, the poise you have when confronted, her the ideology. Then remove the umbrage. Remove the shadow. And let the sun, SUN, the Father, provide light for his seed. You have place there too. Remember, you reflect sunlight. Learn your role, her the ideology. And when the sun is not out, then you could provide nature, your nurture, which will leave morning dew for the seed. When you give him that love, that water, that nurture, and the sun is back, the sun is out, and it's daytime, and the grass or that plant that came from the seed is glistening in the morning light, your role will have been fulfilled until it's time again. But you can't do that until you hold yourself accountable. Or if you are in her position and you go against her, the ideology, hold her accountable. So that the natural order can continue. And that's all I have for now.
Well said. I think with that piece of content, supplemented with the things that we observed in that first video, there's some constructive solutions that can be gleaned from it. One of the things that we do understand and we do know through observation is that a lot of the changes that the community at large is seeking to implement comes from the source that's actually asking for it. It's the person who asks the question already having the answer within. And the change that you want community wise really comes through the galvanizing and correction of the individuals in which your children pass through. Those women groups, I thought was really interesting. There's a real interesting observation in the sense of something that could be implemented within our group, because I know that there are some, there's some sisters who don't subscribe to this type of mindset and they're really looking for a solution. Just as you've pointed out, Brother Seventh. And with that, um, get together as a collective to not only come up with a solution in your circles to, cultivate the type of men that, you want to usher in and develop, but also creating a boundary and challenging your peers who will spout and push this misinformation, especially with the economic incentive back behind it. Um, Programs and shows such as these, like the Seven Coast Dojo, and other content creators who have decided to, add their contribution and try to give some type of solution to the problem that we facing, support those content creators. Pull up on Green Gorilla, pull up on Dr. TSN, um, all the PhDs, all the individuals within our space, that you may peruse and listen to, support them, because this is the solution in action. And you get what you put into it is what you get out of it. And so I think that it's good to sit back and observe what is being discussed, and then from there drawing up a game plan and executing it skillfully and without anything extra will definitely lend to the continual growth or the result that's desired, if I'm understanding what the result is. um but outside of that, just the ideology is really the core principle and problem and roadblock that those who want to impose their narrative and impose what they think is in our best interest, just like what Ayanla pushed out or Ayanla stated when she was abusing her son and trying to control him, would want to do. um so it'll take some sacrifice, but she also mentioned as well, which is why I like this video, because it is, it's not clear cut. And I think the object lesson of these situations and circumstances will never be clear cut. There'll be elements that you can draw from that are constructive, and then there'll be elements that you have to set aside. But the biggest point is just, working with what you have and then building from there. Otherwise, you'll get eaten alive. And that's more so that's a note for the sisters that, that are out there that are listening, because you are in the minority, but I do want to show love where love is due. But as for the brothers, which is what really this video was about, is you're the ones that are experiencing this. You're the ones that have to go through the life as a black male in a society that has deemed you as a permanent underclass, and at any moment used to perpetuate an agenda, or just be used as cannon fodder or as a point of a point of reproduction, because the population size is going down, and the people who are coming in, they're going to need people to mate with, they're going to need people to build with. So with that said, I'll leave that as my closing thought. Brother Seventh, is there a closing thought that you want to leave with the Dojomen and the individuals who've come to stop by?
Yes, to the Dojomen and those who have stopped by today. We don't hear this enough. So if you don't hear it anywhere else, you've heard it here first in the dojo. We see you, and we are proud of you. Continue to stay vigilant and strong. Oos.
Oos.